if you had any questions for me, it would save her another night of coming out.
Right. So we will have your choices. Do you guys want to discuss the Weare School / grade school, or do you want to get on with the town stuff?
Well, it sounds like it makes sense to do the town stuff first, and then wait until the schools are here.
I have no information concerning, I have new information that I'd like to present concerning decisions we're making.
As long as it's not lobbying. No lobbying.
That's all I do.
The chair recognizes Tom Clove from the Board of Selectmen to update us on the ever-changing town budget warrant articles.
Well, we're trying to compromise, and that's good. So,
Where do you want to start? The budget or the warrant?
most of our changes were made in the warrant. And if we go to Article 3, which is the first warrant article exclusive of the budget.
Does this latest copy represent the
Yes.
changes?
Yes, I have mine because I have my scratches on it, but what we did, there was some discussion about 3% not matching up with Social Security or with other statistics, so we changed that to represent a 2% rather than a 3%. So the number is changed to the 26,855, I believe, as match. So there's a change in Article 3 to match that. The other,
What article was?
Three.
No, but what article was the one where you went from 3% to 2%?
Three.
Article 3.
Article 3.
It was changed, it was 3%
The
before.
new handout reflects that.
There wasn't a percentage in there anyways, it was just a dollar amount, but that dollar amount represented at 3%. And this new number that's in there represents 2%.
It was 40,000 before.
Article 4, we felt that we still needed something in there. We're kind of unsure as far as what's left in the mill recall money. And there's 59,000 in the government building maintenance fund right now, 59 plus a little. And there are other projects that were brought up when we discussed this. We talked about dropping this article altogether. But we didn't think that was wise because the South Weare fire station, for example, has an old furnace that, that's one of the few remaining ones that haven't been replaced. The safety complex has some roofing issues that may or may not have to come up in the coming years. So there's a possibility for the emergency there. Plus, we've already discussed that we want to, attack the rock around the roof line and the floorboards.
The rod is not part of the bell tower, correct?
No.
Okay.
No, bell tower is a separate warrant article.
But I didn't know if that was included in that quote or not. I get that confused.
It's just the bell tower.
Okay.
If there's rock there, it's included, but if it's not really rock, but there is some deterioration of the clapboards at the base and around
The base of the building?
base of the tower.
Okay.
That's included in the bell tower.
Now, as I understand it, there's also some roof issues on the structure as a whole. Part of it needs new roofing.
No, I don't think so. No, because that hasn't, if you look at that, it's got a pretty good.
Haven't been up there.
Hasn't been up there too long, no.
Okay.
Same with Perkins Road, I looked at it today, and that roof was replaced in 2013.
Okay.
Now, on those same two articles, the first one then would represent an approximate tax impact of 3 cents, not 5. And the Article 4 would represent approximately 2 cents.
So you're cutting that to 18? Article
15.
4?
15.
15.
Did you get it?
Did you get the right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get them?
No.
That might be more helpful, huh?
1.5. What we've done here, and part of it is, talked about concerns that this group had last Wednesday night, so we've changed that to 1.5. The Board of Selectmen was somewhat divided on that anyways. We went with the 3, with the 2 vehicles, but this is a drop to 1 cruiser, so it'd be half that amount, which would be the number you have, 44,571.
With that cruiser being the one that's replacing going away.
Definitely one would be going to state auction, no probability.
Tom,
Yes.
how can the town be assured that neither this cruiser nor the other 3 new ones will be used by the chief or the lieutenant for take-home purposes?
Well, that's not the plan, and as a board member, I wouldn't support that.
So if this article were amended to state specifically at the
You know,
delivery session.
I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I can assure you that if that comes up, that I will support it not going home with anybody. Okay, and I know that there's other segments of the board with the same thing. The idea there, I can't really get beyond that, but I don't really think that
Well, the
that
chief stated
belongs.
at the meeting here that he would not take one of those vehicles home. And I'm not sure if he also stated it at a selectmen's meeting, but I know he stated it when he discussed the budget here.
I mean, it really was.
Okay, can I suggest a compromise between what the selectmen are asking and what I believe Neil is asking? Can we change it to say fully equipped marked cruiser? Was that reasonable? Is that reasonable, Neil?
I don't understand what the concept is.
A marked police car is less likely to be going out of town for a take-home vehicle versus a unmarked vehicle.
I see.
Yeah. I don't-
Would
Fully
that-
equipped is not.
No, they got fully equipped unmarked vehicles too. The state police have them, other towns have them. So that's,
No, those are called low pros.
we're not gonna discuss that, but is that a compromise that you'd be willing to accept, Neil?
Sure.
Tom? Would that be
I
okay?
don't see any problem on that. Really. I just,
Is it too late to add the wording?
no, we have until Monday night
Okay.
to,
And also it can be amended at the delivery session.
that's right.
Okay.
Just don't take any money away from
Neil never takes one.
it. Article 6 is the same as presented before. Article 7, there are a couple of wording changes, but there's no change beyond that. That's the change in use for the special article, the special fund for vehicle equipment for fire department. The three articles related to the highway department, we made no changes in those, which is for the truck, the backhoe, purchasing the one that we've been renting, and the road reconstruction. The next one, Article 11, I think the only change there, we inserted the word truck, part-time truck driver, just to differentiate between equipment person. It's a truck driver, a highway,
Versus,
taxi driver.
oh, okay. Do we have taxes?
We don't have taxi
Well,
drivers.
that could get a little sticky with CDL versus non-CDL.
You're not gonna have a CDL.
It depends on how bad you use it out, so that's up to the highway person.
He would like one with a CDL, but if he doesn't get it, he's gonna simply put the, right now, I guess the mechanic is driving
He's
the
a pilot.
1-ton or 1.5-ton truck, which doesn't require a CDL, and so that would be where the new guy would be placed. reconstruction fund is the same article. The Parks and Rec article remains the same as do the next two. I think that's pretty much it as far as the ones that we went through and looked at and felt that we could live with.
I have a question on Article 24. I understand why you're not going to televise. You do realize that we have to have schedules that work for us. And if our schedules don't happen to work with when planning boards downstairs or something like that, do we just not hold meetings, or do we just have one big meeting and not go through all these machinations because we have to jump through so many hoops? I mean, we're very subjected to the whims of the Board of Selectmen, the high school, and Weare schools. So unlike the other committees in town, we can't just pick a night and say, hey, you know, we can do this all the time. I've got at least 9 people's schedules I'm working with. You have 5. And then I have 3 other boards that we're dancing around with. That is extremely difficult.
Are you talking about subcommittees of your group as opposed to the whole group? Like this year, your meetings have pretty much all been on
We've
Wednesdays.
managed to.
And the Wednesdays are free in that room. You know, I'm just speaking.
The last 2 years we were on Thursday nights because that seemed to work for everybody. I never know, well, who's ever chair never knows which night is going to be the chosen night.
Yeah, but, you know, really, Lori, it's true with all the committees. I mean, if a person goes on planning board, they know that they have to set aside the planning board nights and all the meetings for the group. Board of Selectmen, you know, we don't say, well, I can't meet Monday. So, you know, it's not for me to say, to answer your question really, but I would just say do the best you can.
Yeah.
And then we'll fight over it.
You know,
Sometimes, Tom, this group holds meetings at other places. We hold a formal meeting at the deliberative session. We hold a formal at the town deliberative session, a formal meeting at the school deliberative session in Weare, and the third formal meeting in the deliberative session for John Stark. Obviously, those are held on those locations, and they are not held in this room or anywhere else. So, would this preclude us from having those meetings?
You know, that's not the intent. The intent is just,
but the problem is you're very
Transparency.
specific on this. And it down the line, I mean, if this is an advisory article like the Board of Selectmen deal with these articles, then we can do it not necessarily.
It says for the town conference room.
Then that would preclude us doing anything at the schools.
No, but I think my interpretation is that it says we would have these televised sessions in the town conference room. That is where we would be televised. That we would not necessarily be televised if we were elsewhere.
No, that's not what it says.
That's not what it says.
Mental plan to require the committee televises meetings live in the town conference room.
Yeah, they're
Period.
expecting all our meetings to be there, period, not anywhere else. And the schools do not televise their meetings.
That's what you mean. Ask them.
Is that what it means?
pardon?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it is.
It means that if we don't televise, if we're at the schools or we're at the elsewhere,
The idea is that.
no matter where we have
that's
to
a rule,
televise.
And that's impossible.
But we could, you know, amend that to cross out town conference room.
But then, here comes the question. We're not going to run around with cameras, Tom, so if the school
Tom, what's
doesn't
around you here?
televise it,
Have you talked to John Fox?
Have I talked to John?
And I know he's hot for this, but you talked to him about, look at this, look how few people are here. This is it. It's not easy to get people to this committee, and there's a reason for that. You just want to get rid of the committee, because if you do, why don't you say that?
That's not the point at all.
Well, again, look at what's happening.
Yeah, and I don't understand that.
Really,
No, I don't.
this is the one committee that has to face the wrath of you, the school boards, and basically all the people that put things forward about numbers. We're the only ones that have to do that.
I guess, again, it's kind of off from what I came into debate, of looking at the numbers.
Well,
But it is the warrant article, and it's the warrant article we have to
I think,
address.
again, my opinion is all the more reason. I mean, this committee, once it makes a decision and puts that decision in the mailer, probably carries more clout than the board of selectmen as far as passing a given article.
Maybe, but it doesn't set policy.
I think
That may be true, but it does not set policy.
Well, my question would be, and this is something for the town lawyer, as you well know, we have various warrant articles that are advisory to the board of selectmen regarding contracts, and they are not necessarily followed. They are advisory warrant articles, and under the RSA's, technically speaking, you can listen to them, but you do not legally have to follow them. They are advisory. The question I would raise is this an advisory warrant article? Or legally, is it mandatory, and at what point does it become mandatory for us versus that? But my biggest concern is, if we're at the schools, who's going to take care of the taping, because we're certainly not.
I understand that now.
And they don't,
We didn't have that discussion.
but that's something when you're proposing a warrant article like this, you need to take into account all these interesting
Why don't we,
things.
before Monday, bounce it off our
Okay, that would be good. Yes, Neil?
Are there any other town committees that do not have the meetings televised, and if so, why not? And why doesn't this article cover them?
There is a board, the Board of Fire Wards is not on camera. They are strictly at the firehouse, and they are not televised.
The Conservation Commission and all those are televised?
Yes, conservation.
So the only board that is not is this and fireworks.
Yeah.
And so why didn't you include fireworks?
Well, fireworks meet on Monday, same time as Saturday, and if we have an article that encourages this committee as well as the board to do it. And actually, one of the points that I've brought up informally, and would like to make it formal, is that we perhaps approach the cable committee for additional equipment. So for example, there are other things that are held in the great rooms, it's called, I believe, at the fire department. It may be valuable to have recording equipment and broadcast equipment there. We haven't moved on that yet, but we do have a pretty substantial amount of money through Comcast that's in our cable account. So, that's a possibility to solve that problem.
And what would happen if this committee decided to meet Monday nights like the Board of Fireworks?
That'd be pretty sneaky, wouldn't it?
Well, that was one day option. No, that's a serious problem. We don't always meet just once a week. That's sort of what Laura was anchoring at the beginning of this. Once we get into this crunch time, we'll meet 2 or 3 times a week.
We met
consecutive
on
nights.
Saturdays, we met on,
We're meeting this morning.
Saturdays would be fine.
but we won't be meeting here. But that's a big question. When we hit crunch time, we're doing 2 or 3 meetings a week.
Well, why don't we talk to Laura about looking at the wording of it
Okay.
before we put it on the ballot?
Have you spoken to anybody on the cable committee regarding this?
No.
And the logistics required to make it happen?
This,
Yes.
if it's held in the conference room, nobody else is using it.
No, I agree. If it's on the conference room, then there wouldn't be any conflicts, but in terms of, if it's held off-site from here, finding a volunteer from the cable committee to record the meetings. Okay.
Because I think if you're going to do this warrant article, you need to have some backups to cover all the contingencies, because it's pretty unique. Anybody have any questions on the warrants?
Yeah, 25 is good.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, there was money donated to the fire department through the state, and it was done in 2016. And if it had been spent, or any part of it had been spent in 2016, then it would not have had to go before the voters. But because it was put into a trust fund and anything spent after 2016 has to go before the voters. So this is to take money for the purpose noted here out of that fund. There'd be no tax impact because it was a gift to the fire department and the rescue squad. But it has to go before the voters.
And can the police use this as well?
That's not the point here of it. We've got an ongoing discussion in the departments here concerning space. And so what the fire department is doing is out in the back area, we're clearing the space and building a mezzanine, which is just not a big project, but in order to provide a workout space to replace one that's kind of mutually used now. That's a room in between, but the police department would like to use that as a locker room, so that they have a separate male locker room and a female locker room rather than all one. Plus the locker room they have is very limited in space, and the size of the lockers are like recycled from the old middle school, so they don't fit the uniforms and things. So what this would do is we free up that space so it could become a locker room that's adjacent to the police department, and then it would provide a space that's totally in the fire department area for this purpose.
So basically, you're taking community space, right? It's community between fire and PD.
It was actually, I believe, started out as part of the fire department space.
So the fire department is basically losing space to the police department, and they're not getting any space back. They're having to take space out of their own space to work because the police department can't seem to deal with their own space.
Yes, we
I thought it was the police department, because the police department has an access door to that room, whereas the fire department has to go to the outside to get to it.
Well, regardless of whose it is, are we guaranteed that you're gonna do the police part of what you just described? Is it guaranteed that you do the police part of what you just described if this passes? In other words, I know we've heard it's locked at 10 o'clock. And is that basically a part of this warrant article?
You're pretty sure that's going to go ahead anyways.
No, this money is strictly for fire.
You know.
But I understand the money is to build the other piece in the wherever it's gonna be built.
I don't think one is contingent on the other two. That's not the plan of this. It's not making one contingent on another.
So we may still have the issue with the lockers next year, independent of this, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're moving ahead with the lockers. Naomi, are you, one of these isn't contingent on the other. We're talking about the police locker room. Pretty much moving ahead with that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So what does it mean moving ahead with that? So if this fails, you're still gonna do that?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So if this fails, the fire department just lose their whatever they use this for now.
Well, they're going to have the new space anyways. It's just that they'll have some equipment in it beyond what they have now.
But this money is money they've already been given, but they have to get the town's approval to appropriate it and spend it, correct?
Absolutely right.
Right? But it's theirs, it belongs to them.
It belongs to,
or anybody else.
It belongs to the fire department and the rescue squad.
Any more questions on warrant articles? Budget.
11.
Oh,
Several times Benji has said that if the truck goes down, then the mechanic will hop his truck to fix the other guy's truck. Why can't that other guy hop in his truck and pop? He's not gonna have two trucks down. In fact, that other guy's gonna sit there and help him or watch him or whatever, put him in the other truck.
Maybe that's a question that really Reggie has to answer. It's his department to run how he sees.
Mathematically, that doesn't make any sense to me.
well, if where Benji was making the argument, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, this way, if he has somebody out sick at any time, they've always got somebody there to cover the routes as opposed to using the mechanic, because right now the mechanic can't plow and be a mechanic. So if you're only down one, theoretically, your logic is correct, but if we go down more than one, we have problems. And even if the mechanic has to work, that leaves a truck open with nobody in it to drive it. With the number of plow routes we have in this town, if everybody has to pick up part of a plow route or somebody else has to extend them, they all play Mickey Mouse with the different routes. The routes take longer and it's a lot more stressful on each person because they're just added to everything. So he's trying to avoid that.
I know what he's trying to avoid. My issue is if truck A goes down and he's driving B, all right? When they get him back to the shed and he starts to work on it, the guy that was driving A, his truck is down, takes his truck and goes back to work on A route. I don't know whose it is, but
Right, but that still leaves you a route that's not covered.
he's saying it's two now, because that's not the case.
But there's a route that is got a problem. If you have one truck down, you have a route that isn't being covered, so now they have to divide it up.
I think we could, if Richard called, he could.
What's that?
Maybe we could Benji call and give the opinion on that.
Any other questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Budget, you need some adjustments to the budget, did you not?
Actually, one of the things that we didn't bring out before, when we talked about the secretarial hours for the highway department and the town administrative secretary, the question came up of additional duties. And we couldn't discuss it then because what we're going to do, there was another person involved, and that person had to be contacted prior to our talking publicly about it. So what we intend to do is put the welfare responsibilities with the town administrative secretary, because realistically, she's pretty much been doing them.
And she's here.
And she's here, and so basically, you'll still see a line in the welfare for the salary, but you'll see a reduction in the line. It isn't 50-50, but there is a reduction in the line for the town administrative secretary. And that's because we're giving those responsibilities to her and we're letting the other person go.
That actually is a good idea.
And we had talked about that, but we hadn't finalized it, so we couldn't come in and say this is what we're doing. Because, it's not an even switch, but it does add responsibility and move some of the money from one to the other. Wasn't a lot else, I don't believe, we made changes on.
So what you described didn't change anything here, it's just, that's just a description of what was going on.
The one thing that we did change is if you compare the last sheet, correct me if I'm wrong, under town administrative secretary, the amount there should be decreased by the amount that you see in the line for welfare. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's split 30 hours in one department and the other.
Pardon me?
It's split 30 hours in the selectman secretary's line and 10 hours in the welfare line.
So there won't really be a change in the welfare line, will be, or is it
It's a smaller.
a small change?
So in the welfare line, we're still going to see the 8,400, but that will go to the,
Secretary, yeah, that'll be fine with secretaries. And there won't be another person in that slot that will be subtracted from what you should have seen in the last.
but for leaving that part off for a second, the town administrator secretary, I think it's called, was also doing highway, that's going away to the highway secretary. So that would reduce her duties, but we were keeping her at the same salary for what was getting reduced. Why were we keeping her at the same salary? Was it because we knew that she was going to be coming in at this? Because we're showing her now at what, where is she? Town clerk.
Would be under selectmen's office.
Probably 138.
I've got the town administrator, I don't see.
If you look down to,
Oh, it's
What
wages
line down?
department secretary, okay. Okay, so that line is at 16,000 plus the 8,000 is going to augment that, correct? Am I in the right place?
There's 24,000. Down from 32.
What line?
138. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, the proposed was 24,000.
And before it was 32.
Okay, but that 24,000, does that include the 8,000 for the welfare, or is that not?
no, we left that in the welfare.
And what is that? Where's the welfare on?
The welfare line is
Under welfare.
under welfare.
538.
But was she, where did we go with her again? So she was initially making, okay, so she was originally making 32, and we dropped her to 24, and then we're adding 8. So
We're
that,
not, yeah, we're not adding 8, she's taking the 8 from the welfare.
but, and that brings her back up, if I got that right? Okay,
Or when she receives her paycheck, it will say such and such will be accredited to welfare, and such will be accredited to
okay,
town administrator's secretary.
that makes more sense now that I have the welfare part put in. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Tom, did you make any changes in the default budget?
No,
Thank you.
Overall questions or questions about specific topics? Are we overall?
Okay.
Under highway, salt and sand, line 432. I just had a question on the math. Asking for 160,000 with the note 3,000 tons at $54. That actually comes up to 5333. 3,000 tons at 54 is 162,000. I just want to make sure that if it's 54 per ton, that you're asking for enough. It looks like just a simple mathematical error or just an issue of rounding out a number.
I don't know.
It's just, yeah, if you do the math, it is $54 a ton right now, but that obviously changes. The estimate's about 3,000 tons, so it's like 162, that's close to what I had last year, I'll keep it that.
So,
Okay.
just rounding off is right.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Just, if I could have just a minute, it's a general plea. I talked about how we set the tax rate. And there's another factor that's come up also since the last meeting, and then we closed out the year, which means we closed out the year on our revenues for 2017 as well as on our budget for 2017. And so we'll have approximately, counting revenues that came in higher than we expected, we'll have approximately $207,000 to go into the undesignated fund balance, which is money that we could use to reduce the tax rate.
How much was that, 207?
207 approximately.
Yeah, 209.
But that's not all that's in the undesignated
No, and
fund
that's the
balance,
point that
correct?
I want to make. Last year when we set the tax rate, we had options that we could go by. If we had put nothing toward the reduction of taxes, the increase for the town would have been 7%. We took $225,000 from that to offset the tax rate, and so the increase was 1%. And the reason I bring that up is because when you look at that 6 point whatever percent that we're looking at in the budget increase, it's not going to be that when the dust settles, for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you recall, this committee last year was ready to recommend a budget that was $180,000 more until it was reduced at the deliberative session, so that when we're working off the increase, if you follow me, if the budget for last year had been $108,000 more, your increase would be a lower percentage. Now that's meaningless, I know at this point, except to put it out. But the other part is that with the amount of money that I just told you from revenues and what we have left from the 2017 budget, along with what was still available that we could have used toward lowering the taxes even more in 2017, there's ample money there to bring the bottom line down to a 1 or 2% increase, and I'm sure that's where we'll end up. I'm only one board member, but I'm the more conservative one when it comes to using this money for tax relief. Last year, there were board members who wanted to go as high as $390,000, but we decided on the 225, and the reason that I try to emphasize is look at it beyond 1 year. We don't want to give people a false picture. Give them a decrease this year, and then we won't have anything next year to keep the rate more or less flat.
Well, and you were also planning on taking the cruisers out. If they fly this year, that was part of the discussion.
Right. But, when you're looking at the total amount of money, it's a lot of money, but when you're talking about having that 207, as well as probably at least 200 that we could have used last year that we didn't for tax relief, because that would have brought our retainage down to 6.25%, which is low. I mean, you want to keep enough there so you don't have to worry about cash flow.
Beth, what do we currently have in our undesignated fund balance?
I don't have that one with me.
Okay.
I do have it.
Yes, Neil?
Tom, did you say that in addition to whatever there is in the fund balance, you expect to lapse an additional $207,000 in 17? Is it your position that you will use that, and you would recommend $225,000 to offset the tax rate for just the proposed budget or also the default budget?
It would be to offset the tax rate. Whatever we end up with, whether it's the default budget or the approved budget, we would use money to offset the tax rate.
And you would support $225,000 in either case? Is that what you're telling us?
I'm not even talking about that number. I'm thinking that probably we could even support more than that. 225 is what we did last year, and that brought the percentage of increase down from 7 to 1%.
And that was keeping like 7% back, right?
Yeah, that was keeping 7% back. The state recommends between 5 and 17% retainage, but we've never kept 17%. Usually we've been in 6.5 to 8% range of retainage. And we really haven't had a cash flow problem at that level. So if we had gone, for example, last year, rather than 225,000, we'd taken 300,000, we would have ended up at about 6.5% retainage rather than 7%. so there's that flexibility there along with, the other piece is the unknown is we have revised revenues in the fall. So the revenues that we put on the warrant are the best estimates at this time. And then starting in August, and I guess right up to the point of setting the tax rate, we look at those again, and they're normally higher because we estimate conservatively. I can't remember that ever being lower at that point when we started out. So anyway, obviously I am lobbying for the budget because our board feels it's a fair budget, and I just wanted to indicate it's not going to have a 6.9% impact on the tax rate. Most of the warrant articles that we talked about were on there last year. And so,
Library wasn't, the Bolton Field wasn't,
and the backhoe.
backhoe wasn't, what else do we have? Do we have any other questions on the budget?
What's the status of the animal control position?
That, we've got recommendations that are in the form of an email. We want to put them in the form of a formal document from Chief Kelly as far as parameters for the job. So we want to redo the job description before we put it out and post it again.
So does that mean you're going to keep the animal control position?
Yeah, we don't have any intention of doing away with it. What we want to do is define it better because we are having a lot of overruns with overtime that the board didn't feel were necessary for that position. So we want to make sure that everybody's in agreement on what we're hiring for.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Does that position bring in revenue as a rule?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you,
One
Tom.
other point, very brief.
You said that last time.
You take all the surrounding towns, you go out one level, you go out two, you broaden the circle. Weare has the lowest tax rate for towns at $2 and at $3.80. It's lowest of any deputy mayor.
Their tax code is only one metric. There's only one metric, there's also assessed valuation.
But what we have for, what's on the tax bill is
Nope, it's a combination of all those two numbers together, so.
Keith, I thought Tom was arguing in favor of keeping us the lowest tax rate. Did I miss something?
I think what I'm pointing out is that we also have a very high assessed valuation. I don't think that comparing towns to towns is not equal if you're not comparing assessed valuation as well as tax rate. That's all I'm saying. It's not a simple number of tax rate. We get a low tax rate and a huge assessed valuation.
yeah, I understand that, but I'm not sure I agree with you.
Maybe you do, maybe you don't. My point is, it's not as simple as you're just saying, that's all.
Thank you.
Is our assessed valuation higher than most towns?
It's pretty high.
Okay. Yes, Neil?
But I thought DRA had a requirement that towns have equalized assessed valuation, so that while there may be some variation, it's not that one town is going to be assessed at 50% of fair market value and the next town at 100%. Maybe one's at 110, one's at 105, one's at 95, but they're relatively close.
But that's the difference, Neil.
There is a difference.
And that is the difference. That difference makes it different. We talk about, it's not as simple as tax rate. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay, good enough. Something I want to discuss before we go in, thank you, discuss any more of this is we need to have another meeting where we do the recommendations, and in order to do that, I haven't gotten responses from everybody. Bill, you have a list of who you've seen responses for on dates. So I need to know in the next 5-6 days when we can have our next meeting to wrap this up.
How do we do it on Monday, no?
Monday's the Board of Selectmen's meeting, that they still have that night to make any adjustments if they so.
We're not having that meeting on Monday.
No.
Why not?
Who can make the meeting on Monday?
I'm only available Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay, so I got 3 that can't.
Right.
So 3 and 3 does not help us at all. At this point, we need all hands on deck. Tuesday,
Tuesday's good. I can be here at 7:30. I got 5:30 meeting I gotta do in Hopkins.
okay, where are you?
I'm in Boston.
Okay, one's in Boston. Wednesday,
She said it to Pamela. Wednesday, I'm good.
I'm fine anyhow.
and you are,
I'm available.
She's flying to Pamela.
okay, so you're gone all next week?
I'm leaving, I'm leaving Tuesday, I'm gone for a month. That's why I thought we were having our meeting, I thought we talked about it last time, we were meeting on Monday.
But then we ran into this other issue of not everybody being able to make it on Monday, and we have to have a solid group. So are we good for next Wednesday? Everybody's ready for Wednesday?
I mean, I can read through material and give you my input if you want, before I leave. That would be very valuable.
Does anybody in the committee have an objection to that?
To what?
Her reading through the material and sending her input?
No? What's wrong
I
with
mean,
it?
if, you know,
That's, always like to hear, that's important, your voice.
okay, I'd be happy to do that. I mean, I'm not sure what you're discussing, but I'll send it.
So next Wednesday at 7 PM will be our final meeting to get this done.
Tomorrow. Okay.
Don't get into the deliberative, in the deliberative sessions. If you make changes at the deliberative sessions.
What's the date?
The 31st,
What's the date of the deliberative session?
it is, the town is the 10th. February. The school sort of, during the week prior to the 10th. Stark is the 9th, and Weare Middle School, I think, is the 7th. State Friday from next.
Does this committee typically have meetings after the deliberative session?
Yes, you have to. One, yeah, probably one.
Okay. I'm going in for surgery on the 12th, and I will be out of commission for 2 weeks after that.
But you can certainly send us an email saying what's exciting, what you like, what you don't like, and what's important to us. That'd be great.
But if there's no changes in the deliberative session, I don't think
No, it's on this, it was modification.
it's only if there's a modification, which they have.
Okay, so as far as the warrant articles and the budget are, do you want to go through the recommendations again tonight, or do you want to hold till next week?
Is Zach coming tonight?
Yes, at 8.
And is Marty doing something here other than smiling sweetly?
I'm sorry?
Is Marty on
She's
the agenda?
waiting- She would like to wait for her, Lorraine, if I'm
Yeah,
correct.
wait, I want to wait for Zach and Lorraine. We can get 2 board work done with 1 superintendent.
So can we go through this quickly, just to give our preliminaries of where we were? Bill, you have them all?
From the last time?
Yep. We're not writing a verbiage, we're just yay, nay.
We already did that.
Well, yes, but John was not here, and it would give him a chance to flush out and see where we're standing.
And something changed, like the cruise one, we take
Yeah,
that,
yeah, it's all changed.
the town hall. Cruise we do, right?
Correct. So Article 3, now that we have the change made, how many are for supporting Article 3?
You want to start the budget first?
No, these are easier.
Article 3 last time, what did you want? Yeah, there was a question, Naomi gave me a question, she thought it was 231. I went back and checked, I had this 321 for it. In any event, went back to the Board of Selectmen, and it was changed from a 3%
To 2%.
increase, but to now it's a 2% increase. It was supported 321 before, I don't know what the consensus is.
All in favor for aye?
Wait,
Go ahead, if you want to discuss.
why don't we raise this to 18%? So that everybody gets the same as the town administrator.
Only if you promise to pay my share of the taxes.
I wish I could afford it.
All in favor of supporting Article 3? Neil, yes, no?
Yes.
We've got
there any
2,
names?
4, 6, 7.
We have 7 voters here today.
So
Is
we're all
that everybody,
yeses.
so it's 7-0 for the 2% on the total.
Shooting through, now for Article 4, putting in 15,000 for the building maintenance capital reserve fund now that it's been reduced. All in favor? We got Bill?
Yeah, I am now, because that would bring it up to 75, which is what I think last year was a magic number that you were talking about. It's kind of what you're wanting.
So we're at 7 yeses.
Yep. The next one is,
The one police cruiser, there's
yeah, we're going from 2 to 1. When we looked at it last week, for a number of things, we wanted to discuss it further. We didn't like it last time, because for 2 reasons. It was last year we had supported the concept of 3 and then 2. But every time we asked questions this time, we really need 2 more to support level officers. Is this something that's needed if we get another police officer as well? And the second thing that rubbed us, although last year we supported it, was it was going to be taken out of unexpended balance. And the cruises were in such sad shape last year, we said, whatever it takes to get cruises online, because they're so bad, in such bad shape. But this year, I know there was some thought that in order to, instead of unexpended fund balance, let's do what we normally do. Right now, now the change has been reduced to 2 to 1, and it will still be withdrawn from the unreserved fund balance.
Neil?
I'm going to support this, even though I think it should be taken out of taxes. I can solve that problem for me by putting in the blurb that this is the same thing as if you were appropriating. You're just going to be getting less money out of surplus to offset the tax rate. And that's the trade-off. There'll be 50,000 less in surplus. If we approve this, Tom said you can do 225. If we didn't approve this and it came out of taxes, it would be 275 rather than 225. It's not going to affect the tax rate one way or the other. What persuaded me to support this is the fact that they reduced it to 1, which is what the chief told us he needs to maintain the current level of service. We misunderstood last year the need for 5. I think we didn't ask the right questions and we weren't given the information. This time we asked the right questions and the chief made it very clear that he needs 1 more for the current level of service, but he wanted additional officers and an additional cruiser to provide an additional level of service. That is to say the 3rd shift or the midnight, whatever he's talking about. I don't think the safest town, the second safest town in the safest state needs that kind of police level of service. And so I would support 1 to maintain the current level of service. So I'm in favor of this article. Now that it's reduced to 1.
All in favor of yes?
I vote yes with the caveat that, as I discussed, and I believe Selectman Cloud indicated that they will add the word marked to the police cruisers. If the other selectmen agree.
Okay.
So we have 7 yeses? Full-time police officer.
Last time we voted, the 06. I think the discussion centered on, well, I got it. Yeah, my notes again. The article would add an officer position, cost reflects only half a year, although not in the article language. Police chief's intention is to increase patrolling the 24-hour coverage of all positions are filled. However, we've had 2 vacant positions for over a year. It's a sense of the committee that we work on filling our current vacancies before we look to add positions.
Also going on that, the fact of the matter is, the police chief keeps stressing that we will not have coverage if we don't have this. The fact of the matter is, state and sheriff's office will, if we have a call, come in. Now, will not patrol. They have never patrolled, so we're not losing something that we have had. And since we're second in the state for being safe, I cannot buy this program at all. Anybody else?
I disagree, but I'll be the one dissenting vote. I vote yes for this one.
One yes? How many noes? 6 noes. Okay, the Weare Fire Department Replacement Vehicle Special Revenue Fund. What do you got for us, Bill?
That was a vote of, let's see, recommended 5-1 last time. And I'll just read it. It's just as easy to read it rather than wing it. Ambulance reimbursements provided as a funding source for fire vehicles purchased or leased by the town. Article would expand use of these funds to include equipment as well as vehicles. Approval to withdraw funds would still require warrant article approval by the voters. Committee had some concern that in the short term it would be easy to approve purchases and have no tax impact. When the time came for a major purchase, such as a fire truck, there would be insufficient funds to reduce a one-time tax impact. There is also some concern that regulatory law changes at the state level may impact future funding levels for ambulance reimbursements by insurance companies. The sense of the committee is that there are sufficient checks and balances, namely Board of Fire Ward, CIP, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, to ensure funds managed with due consideration for large planning purchases.
All in favor of yes? 2, how many is that, 5? 5 yeses, how many noes?
5 yeses and 2 noes.
2 noes. Okay, shooting right along. Highway truck. Snowplow truck.
The plow truck article, it was 6-0. I don't think anybody had an issue. We provide a highway truck capital reserve fund additional $185K to replace a plow truck, fully equipped 10-wheeler. Public Works Director has made a strong case town needs to replace 1 truck per year and to meet the town demands. The cost of the new truck would be partially offset by $30K currently in the fund. We didn't have any issues last time.
How many yeses? It's unanimous. Okay, backhoe.
Yeah, this should be an easy one. It was 6-0 last time, nothing changed. I don't think anything else has changed that.
All in favor of passing the backhoe? It passes. Road reconstruction.
Current warrant article for maintenance of town roads, expect $278,000 from the state with the remainder raised by taxes. Even with a one-time supplemental of over $200K last year, we're still falling behind with road maintenance. No issues here for the committee. Recommended 6-0 last time.
Any changes? Everybody in favor? Still? Okay, Public Works part-time truck driver.
I don't think we need to have a reading on these 6-0 things.
Okay.
That saves some time.
All right. We'll do that. I won't read this one because it was 6-0 last time.
Everybody still in favor?
Oh.
No,
Part-timer?
Okay, we're all in favor of this guy.
7-1.
Bridge reconstruction. All in favor of bridge reconstruction? Unanimous. And we will table this now. Well, is Zach in transit?
I don't know
I thought you were staying in Vermont.
where is more comfortable.
Stay in Vermont.
All right, going, Article 13, Bolton Field Pavilions.
Zoe said.
We were no, correct?
Bolton Park Pavilion was not recommended 0-6.
Anybody for it? Okay, now we're 707. Government buildings, this is
This is the old, this is Bell Tower.
the bell tower.
I'll read it, because we didn't vote in unanimous last time. It's still 49.7.
Yes.
Okay, no changes. Funds would be added to the government building and maintenance fund for repairs of the bell tower and Old Town Hall. Consensus of the committee is to maintain this structure is important to preserving the historical character of the town. Last year, a similar article without specifics failed. The committee was seeking an article with more specifics. We now have that, though there is concern over whether this is the right place to start with. Repairs to the Old Town Hall, there's no disputing that such repairs are needed. Last time it was 5-1. Further discussion? Anybody?
I still would like to see an attachment to this article that would have the Historical Society watching the construction and the budgets on this, because they know this stuff. And we've had continuous problems anytime the town gets involved with repairing this stuff.
Lori, I don't mean to interrupt, I know it's your deliberation, but Sherry Burdick and I met together. She's the president of the Historical Society. She was the one who brought forth the contractor who gave us the estimate that you see here. And it was the same contractor who did the bell tower and the old tower.
I actually had a 2.5-hour conversation with Jerry yesterday, so I still stand with what I say. Vote. Everybody, all in favor? I'm still a no, so we have 6 yes and 1 no.
Okay.
And we are now going to hold, because our guests of honors are here. And this is very important, so I'm going to turn this meeting over to Zach and Mike to discuss the boilers, the warrant articles, and the budget.
Sure, do you want us to join you at the table?
Oh, would love to.
Okay.
I will focus on us.
Thank you for holding for us until 8 o'clock. It's been a busy day for both of us.
Thank you, Tom.
So I spoke with Lori briefly last week about attending tonight's meeting to cover some final details and any other questions that this committee had about the warrant article and the, oh, sorry.
You can bring your additional.
Oh, yeah, John, for those, John, have you been to one of these meetings before? So, by the way of a quick introduction, this is John Ashholtz. Your official title is?
Facility Director for both John Stark, Woods Elementary, the SAU office, and the Equity Special Learning Center.
Right.
Head machinery fixer-upper.
He has taken on an increasing role throughout the district over the years, so I apologize for not knowing exactly which facets he's been covering. But really, this project was born from our facilities committee, which comprises myself, Angela Drake, Principal Corkery, and John, and Kathleen Sargent from the SAU. We had worked, as I had spoken with this group before, we placed an RFQ together when it became evident that we were needing both a capital improvement plan as well as tackling some pretty major projects, not the least of which was some boilers. So I'm going to quickly fast forward and say that about 2.5 years later, we have been working with EEI and Mike Davey from EEI to put together a warrant article for energy improvements, which includes the installation or proposed installation of a dry wood chip boiler. That is, of the total cost of the warrant that we're proposing, as the lion's share of it goes to that particular aspect of the project. So I know we've spoken about this in several forums. I've spoken about it here. We've spoken about it in a public hearing, and I believe the meeting before the public hearing. And to be fair, guys, not much has actually changed in the design of the project, the knowledge of the details of the project, or any of the other facets since probably close to November of last year. All the moving parts we know to be the same. The notable change was that we attended a meeting with the Public Utilities Commission about 2 weeks ago, or last week. And yeah, it was last week actually. I wasn't in attendance, but Mike, you were there, right, John? You were there. And my understanding is that that is one of the very important steps on the road to obtaining a grant for this particular project. of which we're hoping to receive $200,000 from that process. So while it's not a lock and it's not a guarantee, we're feeling very confident that it could happen. So as you recall, the grants and the funding were one of the moving parts we were talking about with this project. The others, of course, being the ability for us to get financing and any of the other parts that we need to do in order to keep it revenue neutral. Hey guys.
Neil?
Zach, let me make a suggestion.
Yes.
When you presented the budget, it was extremely confusing for those of us who are not as deeply enmeshed in the
Yes,
weeds
sorry.
as you are. If you could give us the 100,000-foot overview to start with, then we could appreciate the weeds. But until we have that, it's tough to understand the weeds.
Yeah, sure.
Are you dealing with the budget or the boiler issue?
The boiler issue.
Okay.
So I guess then I'll rewind to where I started before, which was that about 2.5 years ago, we were discussing needing a capital improvement plan because of the several years where we've taken on like a large project and had to swallow that in the budget or put a warrant article together for it. So, planning that out over several years, and again, knowing that the boiler was going to be a major concern of that, our roof being another one. And I believe that this also coincided with the preventive maintenance contract that we had for the existing controls and other units within the school. So that confluence of events really kind of led us to say, well, we should look into this performance contracting idea, which is a way to get a capital improvement plan and finance over many years the installation or implementation of several different projects. The two most common ones are what? Boilers and lighting controls and heating, ventilation, air conditioning, that kind of stuff. So we, like I said, we put an RFQ together. We got 3 responses to that RFQ. What we were looking for was somebody to come in and do an audit in the first place, which would allow for us to understand whether or not there was any opportunity for us to yield financing for improvements out of reduced energy costs. That's the basic premise of performance contracting or financing projects of this nature. And once that had been completed, also proposed to us how you might go about an implementation of the items on that particular audit. And what we were looking for was, the opportunity for respondents of that RFQ to achieve grants, whether or not they were using proprietary controls, whether they'd be working with local vendors, and then of course what their fee structure looked like, because part of it would go, front end into an audit. Some of it would very likely be, markups on hired vendors for different services. So in the final analysis, it really became a 2-horse race between Siemens and EEI, even though there were 3 respondents. And we ended up choosing EEI based on the total cost being less than Siemens, but most notably because of their ability to secure grants in their prior projects. Plus their list of references was extensive. And I think, just as a quick aside there, I know Keith and Mike and John, and I know it was Patty, I think, right? Yeah, all went up to Plymouth High School to see an installation like we're talking about on Monday, which was also referenced in this RFQ, and that was one of the deciding factors, I think.
And I'm going to want to hear about that after.
Sure,
find
yeah.
a place that you think it's appropriate.
Right, so we, conversely, or coincidentally, we also had Hillsborough at the time had chosen to go with Siemens for a very similar sort of project. And John, I know, had seen both the Hillsborough installation and was it the Plymouth installation? Or
I visited both of them in the Hillsborough location. I've been to several times just to follow up on that communication stream and how they were feeling about the project
Right.
and what they knew about what was really going on, because that would be something that's important to me in making sure that I'm school ready.
Okay. So the way that once we had made a decision on the RFQ, the way that this was sort of shaping up was that we needed to get an audit on the like started and going. So
Yes, Zach, just let me help you out, really. The purpose of this program is at no additional cost to the district to put in energy efficient systems replace the boiler, take care of the roof, and do all
I understand where you're going on this, but we have a couple members that do not have the background to this.
But this is the finance committee. And
But they're entitled to know.
yeah, but we can save a lot of time, and these guys don't have to stay so late if we focus on the things of issue to the finance committee.
So what, yeah, sorry, I misinterpreted what you were looking for a 10,000, foot view.
100,000.
100,000 foot, whatever it is. I assume you wanted me to kind of go over the path that got us here, nipping those things in the budget.
Chirp in if you want more.
To Neil's point, what this is we keep talking about it as a boiler project, but it's really a warrant article that has 3 or 4 or 5 moving parts in it. We're looking at doing a boiler, we're looking at doing lights, we're looking at doing controls and a couple of roof units, okay, right, as part of this overall project. The total price tag is $2.2 or $2.3 million, as we're talking about in the warrant. The way that this will be funded is through this grant that we're talking about, and ultimately in reduced fuel costs. We'll be trading in dollars on a line item in the budget that is being used for fuel and electricity, namely heating oil and electricity, and converting it into financing charges for this new project and the purchase of wood chips instead of oil. Okay.
Just to add to that 100,000 foot view, the reason that we're at a decision point, why do this in 2019 versus 2020 versus 2021, is that the oil tank is, and oil infrastructure needs to be replaced either in the next year or 2 years. If the tank has an extra year, but the oil lines need to be replaced this year, and the boilers are leaking, can't go into high fire, they're about 30 years old, so it's time to do something.
The DES has said they have to go.
And the advantage of this program is that we're in fact borrowing $2.4 million to pay for all of this stuff. But all of this stuff will reduce our utility costs.
Right.
So that the cost of the payments on this plan come out of the reduced money that we don't have to spend for utilities and fuel and so forth.
Right.
And so, while it's not no cost, we're not saving any money here, but what we're getting for no additional cost is a new boiler, is that the gas tank lines, the boiler, the roof, and whatever else.
But if there's a profit, if we
One
have,
second, before you do that, but compounding that point, so that in the current budget line, the electricity at 140 proposed and default, and oil at 135, if this passes, would some of that come out?
That's exactly the idea. So this actually, the answer I'm going to give you doesn't have anything to do with this project. It just has to do with the nature of the way these things work, is that when we propose a budget or we use the default budget, we have to do it in spite of. Right, but that's the answer to your question, is that yes, it changes those line items. It has an impact provided that you pass the subsequent warrant.
Right.
So yes, the answer is yes, it does.
In future years, we would see those either be zero or much lower.
That's right, yes, yeah, and
So in fact, it would save money, that was what I was trying to
Well,
raise.
No.
there'd be a financing line
right,
Okay.
of, I think 119 is what's in the.
yeah, I think so, yeah.
But the fuel and electricity line would come down by 119.
Yeah.
And there is the possibility,
Yeah,
possibility
that's what I said, yeah.
that there would be even greater savings.
That's correct.
Nobody's guaranteeing anything.
No,
What
to
the
that,
company is guaranteeing is that we will at least make enough savings to cover the.
we would structure the financing in such a way that through a conservative estimate in energy savings, we will break even, okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so given that there's a possibility that we would not, you're right, that would mean that we would have a lower line item probably in the fuel utilization costs in particular, because the financing costs are gonna be what they are,
right,
right? But you're gonna use less wood chips and less electricity, essentially.
The other issue is that whether or not we get the grants, this makes economic sense. It's a better deal if you get the grants.
Yeah, we would either do more, finance it for less time, or
Whatever.
spend less money, right? I mean, any one of those things could be a
but
contingent.
if we eventually make a profit, the
Mhm.
school board would put that money in, we could hopefully see a reduction.
Right, the mechanism that does that.
That does that, you would make those judgments, you wouldn't say,
Right.
oh, let's go build an addition.
Yeah, no. Not only the magnitude, the out of scale, it would, right, it would just sit there, yep.
You would also have the option to turn that around and pay that lease off faster.
Yeah.
So you can realize the actual savings
Right.
faster.
Now, before we go forward, I would like to hear what you learned in Suffolk.
Can I ask you one more question first? So one of the things, this relates to my visit, our visit up there. One of the things they pointed out about the equipment up there, which was very impressive, but there's basically like 50 equipment. Is that the same type of equipment that's coming in
Yeah,
here?
it's a Froilan boiler.
It's a Wiesner.
Okay.
So once this is paid off in 20 years, do the costs of maintaining it jump dramatically such that there's no savings coming in at that point, or does the cost of the system then drop down quite a bit? Or something?
Like a car, like everything, it's not a linear cost of maintenance, but no, there's no precipitous jump in as soon as it's paid off.
So in fact, there should be a precipitous drop in the overall cost of the system.
Once your
paid off.
your debt service is gone, that's right.
The short answer is it's very impressive. I mean, John's last name? That's your name. What was it?
John
Asheville, yes.
Yeah, gave us a tour of the whole system. They have pretty much what they're describing here, a big wood chip furnace and a propane backup, all new. I guess that we won't be doing quite as much in the way of electrical improvements, lights and that kind of stuff. They worked out a lot of that. So they actually saw substantial savings beyond what they were anticipating.
Lights are a big one. New lighting valves and bulbs are good.
And I don't think that's necessarily anticipated here, but it was a very impressive system. And now that I actually have the warrant article, are you actually going to?
So actually, on the answer to that is, the SU doesn't publicly post the warrant until the board members have signed it, just to ensure that there's no misinformation that gets out there and versions of the warrant don't get out.
But eventually you will?
Yeah, I signed it yesterday. I was there for another piece of business, so I signed it. It'll be online.
That should be posted probably tomorrow by Friday at the latest.
But that was what was handed around in the public
We were
hearing.
waiting for signatures.
This was not handed out
To
at
do
the
it at a
public hearing.
public hearing?
No.
That was, sorry, at the actual public hearing, there were copies of that were
Yep.
around.
Yeah, well, I guess we're going to take it up then.
I got what they handed to me.
So, well, that's what I said. I want to make sure we nip that one in the bud. That there's no misinformation. There's no attempt to hide anything. Like, that was what was at around the public hearing.
Yep.
Sorry if it didn't make it into the right hands, and it's not on the web because I hadn't signed it until yesterday. So that's the only reason. That's why I had no problem. I didn't send you the rest of it because I had a bunch of handwritten notes on the bottom part of it that you didn't need to read. But that's what it was. So.
That was very helpful to actually see my point. Thank you.
Yeah, you can understand the moving parts based on the way that that's written, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Which I didn't understand when you answered my question by saying, why don't you go see it?
Yeah.
It looks great, but doesn't tell me how it's going to be financed.
Yeah, it's right.
So you're good with it, you don't have any?
I'm very impressed, yes.
Bill?
The question that came up before is, in the event this company goes out of business for some reason in 5 years from now, what happens? Who owns the equipment and what happens?
So this was a question at the public hearing, and I'll make a stab at it, and you correct me if I'm wrong. The agreement is between us and the financing company, and not with EEI necessarily. EEI is involved in the design and build of the project and guarantees the savings, but frankly, we own it with the financing company technically owns it, and we're leasing it through them. Did I get that right? Okay.
Where do we go if the system fails?
Pardon me?
Where do we go if that system fails and the company's out of business?
So we're talking the contingency on top of that now. So EEI is out of business and the boiler winds up failing.
Right.
I mean, at that point, we probably fall back practically on our preventive maintenance folks and or the manufacturer of the boiler.
Well, we've already changed HVAC contractors to a company that has partnered with EEI a lot in the past. So they're not only are they very versed in the systems and the control systems that they use, but it's a local company. They're already doing some wonderful things for us in the building. So if they go out, we're covered, we're good.
The boiler system that we're proposing is Wiesner, and I know that boiler companies aren't household names like car companies, but they're a $6 billion a year revenue company with, they're the leading boiler manufacturer in Europe, Russia, and they're fairly big in the United States as well. If you watch the Winter Olympics, you'll see the skiers from Germany all say Wiesner on it. So it's not like a one-off fly-by-night. It's the same system that Plymouth State has, Plymouth High School, John Stark High School. You're not going to have like a one-off.
They put it down the same one on
It's
Joffrey.
a company that a lot of repair companies are familiar with. I've
Yeah.
done some checking, and it's not like you have to go hunt for somebody
Right.
to know how to work on it. There are companies out there that are very familiar with the system.
And although you didn't ask the controls for this is a big turnoff for the Siemens program. They're not proprietary controls.
That's important.
We'll work with whatever we need to work with. That I know a lot of folks are like, well, whatever the cheapest items are. We've seen that mistake happen in this district. We're not interested in that. I think we're interested in lowest total cost over the lifetime of
And
ownership.
this will solve the classroom that sits on the end that's ice all the time
We
versus the classroom that's baking eggs on the
Well,
desk?
it's a step in the right direction. I think, an HVAC person will wind up telling you that you can't make everybody happy because there's a huge psychosomatic component to that. But aside from the boiler and the controls and the roof units, we do have some other systemic issues that aren't actually part of this. They're actually more part of our PM contract. And, you can see our minutes from our facilities meetings at any time if you'd like. But we've sort of organized those projects into 3 phases. And earlier back in the fall, I think we addressed most of like high priority kinds of items and even the second.
Yeah, there were several safety issues that were addressed first. That's been done for a little while. The other issues are the ERVs and roof and all those things you mentioned before, which have been included in our new 10-year CIP plan. So total transparency, visibility on what we're looking at from here on out.
The dovetailing is that we would take this project as sort of like the jumping off point to tackle a major project with the boiler. And then starting in next year, probably really plan out some of the items that are going to be on our CIP, like John's talking about ERVs, resurfacing the track. I mean, I know we just did that, but we're trying to plan it out so that we don't have to be like, hey, by the way, guys, this is the year we're going to spend 110 grand on putting a new track up there, and you don't, couldn't we just do that? Building other buildings and ground stuff outside and the roof. The roof is the other major piece that we have to address, and we're trying to break that out into phases and leverage the other funding sources we've got for that.
Any questions?
What's the length of time for the finance?
We don't actually have it nailed down yet. Mike, you've been looking into that, I think, already.
So the warrant article asks for up to 20 years. Well, what we'd like to do is look at what the interest rates are at that time for the different options and see what makes the most sense. So obviously, the longer term you go, the lower your monthly payment is, so the better it looks on the annual budget. The shorter term you go, the more you save in overall interest costs.
Right.
So that's a balancing act that we don't know what the rates are right this second. I can tell you in Plymouth, they went with a 19-year deal because they were more interested in the shortest term. And in Conant, which is Jaffrey and Ringe, they went with a 10-year deal because they were. And so we're going to look at what the best option is based on the payments, the energy savings based on the available grants, rebates, and see what makes the most sense at that time.
What's the expected lifespan of the equipment that's being installed?
So there are Wiesmann boilers operating 50 plus years with that system. If you look at ASHRAE, which is the standard that governs it, it's 30 years is what they say you expect. Interestingly, that's about the life of some of the equipment that we're replacing now, so it seems good.
I imagine that when Neil and Lori are here in 50 years, they'll be telling us.
Okay, sure, yeah, really?
The fuel costs, the wood chips, are they going to be procured locally?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, actually, we're really proud about that one. So, Kuzno down in Henniker is one of the 2 producers in the entire state for this kind of product. There are, you'd say wet wood chip boilers or green wood chip boilers that exist out there. Merrimack Valley has got one. Yeah, and Pembroke's got one too. But so we're working with them to supply, and because they're a local vendor, we're able to get an even lower price than what the market will bear for.
You made a comment that kind of worries me. You said they're one of 2 in the state.
So right.
That's kind of rare.
So of dry wood chips, there's a lot of people that make green wood chips. So
will this new system burn green wood chips?
I don't know if it does.
It will burn green wood chips, but
It's not energy efficient.
this gets into a whole
Right.
long conversation. Green wood chips have a lot of moisture content, so that means you'd be delivering a lot of them. But this system is tri-fuel. It can burn green wood chips, it can burn pellets, it can burn dry wood chips,
And
propane actually. So
core.
whatever the 4 version
Quad.
tries, quad. And so it can burn any of those things. The best bang for the buck is with the dry chips made in Henniker, by far and away.
Okay.
Right.
Are we locked into a guaranteed price, and if so, over what period of time?
I think they talked about a 2-year price on the dry chips.
Okay.
One thing, compared to oil, if you Google this, the 10-year price on wood chips and wood pellets, it's fairly level compared to oil and propane, which jump up and
I'm
down.
just thinking 15 years ago when wood pellets first came out, they were dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden everybody started buying them and prices
So,
skyrocketed.
yeah, the difference between pellets and what we're talking about here is they're a manufactured product, right? So technically, you know, green wood chips are the least manufactured product that you can burn, right?
The other thing you should raise is that this is also a propane system that you can switch over to.
Yes.
Right, and so that, we wanted to be able to run on any one of those fuels depending on what the market would bear. Right now, dry wood chips are the best fuel efficiency for the dollar that we could put into that boiler, right? And so we feel that we're future-proofing the system making the system future resilient, I guess you could say, by allowing for it to burn everything but oil.
Neil?
Is it a benefit to the district that after the 20-year contract is up and we've paid off, and useful life is 30 years, arguably, that we have 10 years of savings at that point?
All things being equal, yes. Yeah, there's a window of significant savings there. Yeah.
Does this warrant article take into account storage of wood chips?
So the significant cost of this, why I said it's the boiler and all this supporting work for the boiler, right? So we've got we've not been up there to see it, the two boilers we've got now are sort of in the back of a maintenance area of the building. We would take those out of there and we actually have to restructure or repurpose some of that room because we've got some electrical components in an area that can't be there in order for there to be storage of the dry chips. Yes, there's a bunch of retooling. I can also do some work in the driveway area there to be able to make all the work. It's all contemplated in this cost.
And that helps you get us a lower cost on the system because they can actually store it inside the smaller storage system since the delivery can be more regular. The people up in Plymouth use the same company for their wood chips. But they have to have a much bigger storage system because they're basically hauling them much longer distance.
Right, yes, and I don't know that they don't manufacture them the same way. They actually, the way that Froling that delivers those, right? Yeah,
No, actually, they use Cusno.
They use Kuzno, okay, all right, yeah, so, got it.
And my last question is, I'm envisioning like the old days and people shoveling wood chips.
Sorry, yeah, there's a hidden budget line item for a pellet shoveler.
This system.
It's an auger.
Really impressive. It can run unattended for about a month at a time. They dump the ash like every week just because it's there. Like, they easily run through the holiday without anybody there. And it's really cool how the wood chips are, first of all, they get into the whole thing in the first place, and then how they're basically into the furnace while it's running.
Okay.
And then the ash is flowing out all the time.
You have a generator at each pool, and if so, will that work with this system?
Yeah, it's a good question. We looked at, I'd asked about doing cogen type stuff, but no, this does not include a generator.
No, but what I'm asking is, will this generator power the system will the generator on site power this so you still have heat in the building if power fails?
You mean, do they have an emergency generator?
Yes.
Will it back it up to
Yes.
this system?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they're two totally separate.
And it's a sufficient enough generator to power this?
So my understanding is that boilers and generators are operating in two different areas. The boiler generates the heat, the generator actually runs all the controls and other units that distribute the heat. Is that a fair statement?
I think he's talking about the backup emergency
Yeah.
generator.
Yeah.
Emergency
Well, it's not a running
generator
furnace.
provide the-
So
When you offer it, okay, yes,
No, I think we're misconnected. I think he's asking if the power goes out, is there a backup generator that will keep this boiler running?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's my question.
Yes, Neil?
Zach, what are the downsides to this?
Behind this furnace
Let's see, so the downsides,
that comes through the wall outside. We won't be coming through the wall.
back when we were talking about how we were gonna structure the warrant,
This is an auger system.
we were exploring what were at the time downsides, because we weren't sure whether we were gonna be able to get financing within a 20-year window, okay, right? You know, we were looking originally, the numbers were like maybe 10 or 12 years only. So we've said, okay, well, let's take that as a potential downside, that we wouldn't get the financing we were looking for by making that flexible. What if we don't get the grant? That was a potential downside at one point when we said, okay, but if we don't get the grant, we don't have to do as many of the projects. What if we don't do the lighting is another potential downside, right? Then we wouldn't get some of the savings that are there. I guess the answer to your question, Neil, is we tried to tackle what all the downsides could have been early in the project to say, if we don't do them, or we can't get it the way we want, how would this project still structure itself, right? When your goal is to make this tax neutral, really the only true downside is that it wouldn't be tax neutral, okay, right? Like that's the answer to that question. But we have enough moving parts in it that we will structure to be tax neutral and be able to do it.
And you also have the option if you can't make it work,
Mhm.
not to do it.
That's correct.
Well, sort of. You do it to replace things now.
Well,
Yeah.
so in fairness, this warrant is structured in such a way that it has to be tax neutral, right?
No, I understand that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that there's a lot going on here. You're
You
also,
have to
aren't you
handle
also
the
removing
boilers
the
and
tanks?
the,
Yes, no, those are, right, so those are, is the tank removal contemplated in that price? I don't remember how we did that between that and the budget.
In the budget, the line removal is in the budget, so that has to be done either way, whether it's half.
Yeah.
And the oil tank is in the default.
No, it's in the proposed.
The proposal, not the default.
That's right. I knew we had parts sprinkled throughout depending on what we had to do and what we were planning to do.
So if this article passes, will you have money in the either operating and or default budgets that you won't have to spend? And if so, what happens to that?
Depends on which budget is approved by the voters, but yes, yes.
Assuming the proposed budget is approved,
I believe the answer to that is yes.
and what will you do with that money?
The same thing we do, I think this came up at the public hearing, the same thing we do at the end of every year, we look at our total unreserved fund balance, basically the surplus. We identify any large chunks that were, hold on, I'm getting your answer, okay? We look at any of the chunks that could have been attributed to a project or something that we undertook but didn't happen. So for instance, funding deductibles for health insurance, or back during the Affordable Care Act, we did budget, you'll recall, we budgeted money for the fees or taxes that we would have to pay for that. We did not turn around and commit that to year-end projects at the end of the year. We ended up giving that back to the voters in the unreserved fund balance. We would do the same thing here.
So Lorraine, who always has these wonderful projects up her sleeve, would not be in a position to say, gee, you just freed up $55,000 because you're not using that $55,000 in the budget for the oil line. Let's now use it for project L.
So to be, the truth,
No project for
the real answer to this question is it's actually the board's prerogative to do whatever they would with that. And I know that's what you're getting, and I know that's what you're getting at. And so the reality is, Lorraine could very well go, hey, Zach, I want to build an auditorium off the back of the building. And I would say, gee, Lorraine, that sounds like a great idea. It was always in the master plan. I don't see why, the reality is that the reputation that the board creates by doing that or not doing that is what you have to go on here, Neil. Okay, right?
So you're making a commitment that you're not going to do that?
That's right, that's what I'm telling you, yeah, exactly. And we've done it historically, so I'm asking you to not only trust me now, but base it on what it is that we've done historically.
I agree, I just wanted to hear it once again. I love the song.
His favorite
from
song.
the beginning of
We've
this
been
year,
trying to.
made everything clear. You wanted clear communication with us, and you certainly allowed us to come and see and question. I mean, how many hours now have we put into this? And you have definitely given everything to...
Mike's the one that drove from Burlington, Vermont.
She's back tomorrow for you.
Do you want to go back to Vermont tomorrow? Does anybody have any other questions?
We're on the boiler, right?
Yes, sir. Are we good with the boiler? Is there anybody here who is not on board with the boiler? The warrant article. So the finance committee is yes on this? Hands up. Are you awake over there or not?
I'm torn.
Okay, so we've got 6 yeses and 1 confused. What do we need to do to unconfuse you?
What are you gonna do with storage? What are your trucks gonna come in? They're gonna come in probably 53-foot trailers, like a regular Jeep trailer.
So actually,
What are you gonna do with that with all the cars up there?
so we did talk a little bit about delivery, right?
Let me grab this for you.
Yeah.
We already have 55-foot trailers coming in to deliver oil. So there is a fire lane that's right next to the back of the school. That will stay there. It has to. It's a fire lane. There's hydrants on the outside of the building right there. That's where the oil truck pulls up. That's exactly where the wood chip truck will pull up and blow them straight into the building.
Are we gonna blow them off then with a blower?
Yep, that was part of the agreement that we came to with Kuznos, and that's what makes it actually a much cheaper proposition than the price that they're supplying to Plymouth.
How close in proximity is that gonna be to classrooms, and what that noise factor how is that gonna affect our education process?
So there's a classroom that is approximately 50, 60 feet from there. But what we usually do is have have the fuel trucks show up after 3 anyway,
So it's not disturbing.
so there wouldn't be any classes in there at that point at all. We just make sure that it's the last delivery of the day.
Any other questions? I think you're going to be fine on this one.
Hope so. Thank you, guys.
Does anybody want to discuss the high school budget? Default, proposed, questions?
Haven't seen it.
We had it last week. Neil?
I'm looking to make sure I have the right,
So we do yes or no, or?
yeah, just yes. I don't think I have the information here, but as I recall, the proposed budget was just about the same as last year's budget. And I hope I'm not confusing where to start.
You have to forgive me, I didn't bring the material with me for that one, but
I'm sorry, John, you're right.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We wish you a nice
Safe
ride.
travels.
Thank
Mike D, D-E-Y. He's from Energy Improvements. Is it Energy Improvements Incorporated or? What's it? EEI. Yeah. Thank you, John. Good night.
you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the voter approved budget for 17-18, the budget we currently are operating under is $13,534,338. Okay, the proposed budget for 18-19 is $13,304,546, which is a decrease of $229,795 from the prior. So we're down almost $250,000 from the prior.
And now when you add in the teacher's contract, you still have an amount that's lower than last year, is that correct?
That is correct.
Why the decrease? Forgive me, I'm not.
Teachers,
like,
like,
it's-
Staff.
We looked at retirements, and people that have left and didn't fill those positions. So this budget represents a decrease of 4.4, something like that, positions.
How do you point for position?
They don't work full-time.
They don't work full-time. They work 8 days a week.
Are you saying that there are 4.4 fewer teachers?
Correct.
And then you...
It's 5 positions, but the full-time equivalent is 4.4.
And that, so you decreased the number of staff, but didn't you also make a significant savings because some of the people who left were highly paid?
That's right.
And they were going to be replaced by people who were lower paid?
Most of the savings is by not replacing people at all, so that's why there's that.
But in a traditional sense, that's the incentive behind the early retirement contract. Yeah.
What's the student-to-teacher ratio with this new 4.4 deduction?
Calculated that.
It would vary from content area to content area, but our class sizes average somewhere around 20.
So what is the impact of the decrease in the staff, or the teaching staff?
2 of the positions that we decreased of, it was a 1.6, so it was someone who was working 3 days a week and someone who was working full-time. They were both special ed positions, and because our special education population has decreased, we eliminated those positions. So that was...
Are those paraeducators or?
No, those were teachers. Those were teachers. Because of some decline in enrollment, we also, one of our science teachers, we stole and made him the Dean of Teaching and Learning in Weare, and we did not, right, we did, and we did not replace that position. We moved student schedules around, and it's working just fine this year, so I didn't put it in next year's budget. We thought we might have to replace that person, but we're finding we're working just fine without that position, so that was reduced. We have a retirement in the social studies department, and again, for the same reason. 4 or 5 years ago, you weren't on the finance committee at the time, but Neil will remember this. I talked about right-sizing the organization. Bill, you would remember this too. And because at one point, we had close to 900 students. We're now down to 668 as of our October 1 report. So we want to make sure we still have plenty of offerings and that we're competitive and kids have what they need to make them college ready and career ready. On the flip side of that, we hired a welding teacher that if I could clone him, I would, because in his day, most teachers teach 5 blocks in the day, and he's teaching a 6th block, and we could use him for a 7th and an 8th and a 9th because the welding program has just skyrocketed. And we heard a presentation from students.
Yes.
You were there for that presentation from students,
The
and
excitement level was amazing.
so that's how we structured some of this.
Yes, Neil?
What's happening on the revenue side? I'm concerned about the impact of the loss of various kinds of revenue
Yeah, it's a good point.
on the tax rate.
We are down for adequacy, right?
We are down in adequacy. Adequacy last year went up about 200,000. This year it came down about 200,000. The only other area that right now we have a little bit of concern of is where it's really hard to pinpoint is in our Medicaid, because that's dependent on the student population during the school year, and we can only assume that the students that are there now, with the exception of maybe a couple, will be there in the following year. So Medicaid is really the only other area that, from my opinion, is very difficult to try to do a calculation on that.
But basically what you're telling us, if you're saying Medicaid is probably going to be about the same, or at least
Yeah.
that's a reasonable estimate.
Yeah.
Your spending is down 400,000, your revenue is down 200,000, but you're going to spend 150 or whatever it is on the contract.
But if
So,
you look at the whole, if you're looking at the whole, including the contract,
Hold on, you're forgetting one piece of revenue, which is the unreserved fund balance.
Yeah.
So
I'm assuming that at the end of the day, it's going to be the same as last year.
that's actually, that's
That's
what I'm, yes, but that's what I'm sort of getting at is when we look at the revenues, okay, right? We try to treat them as separate items. And I understand the point you're getting at, which is if we're gonna save $200,000 on the expense side, we're just gonna spend $200,000 more on the revenue side. You know, even though you're passing a lower budget, so to speak, and everybody's cheering and high-fiving, you're actually really kissing your sister on this, right? So the point is that, sorry, I guess we maybe to allay your concerns, that has been something I've harped on for the last 3 or 4 years, and we've paid very close attention to the revenue side. And when we look at our reconciliations month over month over month, we use that as a target to make sure that we don't overspend at the end of the year, so that we can keep tax rates the same, because it's the revenue side that really dictates your tax rate as a function of the revenues and the expenses, so to speak. So we have proposed, I believe, a revenue side of our unreserved fund balance of something similar to last year
yeah, $500,000.
to start with, okay, right? But that's because we wanted to have something to start with. As we get closer to deliberative session and the vote, obviously, right, we'll have a more accurate number.
Am I correct that unlike the town, which keeps the money it doesn't spend, the
Yeah.
school district has to return the money that it doesn't spend to the town?
That's correct.
That is right, yeah, in the unreserved fund balance. It becomes a revenue line item next year. Yeah.
So if you don't, quote, spend your surplus to lower taxes, it goes back to the town in some way.
No,
It
those are
goes back to
equivalent.
lower taxes.
Those are the same thing, what you just
Got
said.
it?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And that's mandatory.
This district doesn't have it. The one alternative to that is damn it, Kathleen, I can never remember the name of this. Retained earnings fund. Yes, it's a legislative thing that you would all have to vote in this district to allow the district or the school board to keep, what, 2%?
Up to 2.5% of your assessed valuation.
2.5, and that would have to be a warrant article.
Right, we haven't put it forward here because we know that it's
And if we
incredibly
have to
unpopular.
pass Henniker and us, or just?
It's
Yes,
a start,
that would
it's a
be
start.
start,
Yeah.
both times.
Henniker does have that, the Henniker voters agreed to that a handful of years ago,
Yeah.
and
Just because they agreed to it doesn't mean
That's
that's
correct.
where we have to.
No.
it's a district by district thing.
No, because it's a separate school district. Henniker is a separate school district.
You are a multi-district SAU,
Yes,
which
you
means
are.
you have
Yeah.
too many school districts and too few towns.
And a lot more.
That exercise what we got.
Any other questions?
Starting budget?
Yeah, is there any idea on what the split is between the Henniker and Weare?
Yes.
Because that can somehow, it goes up and down, and then
It-
suddenly our tax rate goes, even though it may be flat, but it goes
Yeah,
up this
you're right,
direction.
that's a good point.
Right now, in the current year, and in what we're projecting, for the information that we have, Henniker is at 27%
Versus?
versus, trying to figure this out in my head, it's been a long day, 63?
73.
73.
So where,
And where were you last year?
what was the ratio last year though?
Just about the same. It was just about the same.
It's based on equalized valuation.
So it's
and
not a
student
major,
enrollment, so-
oh my God.
Oh, no.
No, there have been years where it shifts pretty
Yeah.
There's
significantly.
been years where it's like
I think
30
it was 2
and
years ago, I was
70,
surprised.
and, but I think it was probably like 29 and 71. It doesn't fluctuate a whole
So
lot.
three quarters of it
Yeah,
comes back to where it was.
What fluctuates basically is your equalized valuation. That's what changes.
Student population, one, two.
It can come in.
Student population stays pretty.
As far
It
as-
doesn't
Yeah,
change
pretty
enough
constant.
to really dictate. I mean,
Yeah.
Henniker has so few students. that
Henniker
it's-
Henniker classes over the last 5 to 7 years have been about 45 kids. Eighth grade, 45
And
kids.
nobody's moving to Henniker because their tax rate's $33 per thousand.
Yeah.
And our graduating classes at Stark have been averaging about 175.
Yeah, they've done about 680, right, to start them, about 680. and
Exactly.
One time, when it was high,
Yeah, it was
the
over
high
nine-
one, like
over
about
eight-
830 or so. a couple
It
years
was almost
back.
900 at one point.
So you can see, I don't know what the capacity of the schools are here, and I know it's been sort of obfuscated by building a new school in town here, but in Henniker, they have the capacity to educate close to 600 students, and they're like just around 400 right now.
14, yeah.
So and Neil, I know I've talked with you about this, it's a pattern across New Hampshire that, community sizes are shrinking, there are fewer children being educated in a lot of districts, so it's a challenge to lots of folks, lots of communities.
Not where.
Fair. Or Stoddard. Please, yeah, come on, we'll take it. Yeah, build a house in Henniker, that's a good idea. We use the help.
Any other questions?
Can I just, one other thing?
Sure.
I'm just looking back at 16, 17, when you do the budgets. The budget in 16, 17 was 13.18 million. That's the actual expenditures were 12.15. So you had
Yes.
so it was about $1 million left over. Is that right? In that particular year?
Well, what's not showing in here is because it's a different fund, and we have to show it as a transfer. We don't show you're missing about a little over $300,000 for food service.
Right.
It doesn't show up in this.
That's one
So
of
it
the
was
biggest
around
moving parts of- right.
600, 700,000.
Okay.
So last year we returned, 600 and almost, it was almost.
How much of that went back to the towns,
Well, that was after the fund.
We didn't have any,
Oh, that's right, last year we
projects
didn't,
last
yeah,
summer.
the
No
year,
special
right.
projects?
Yeah.
we didn't do any.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just.
No, that's okay.
I'm just asking a question.
No, it's a good one, yeah.
Any questions on contracts, or,
Yes.
go ahead.
So can you summarize the percentage raises in this new contract?
Yeah,
Couldn't
there
find
was-
that between
No, it's a good
contract
question.
I read through and,
We talked about it, I think the slides that are there give you like the effective increases.
they don't make sense.
I know, it's a little complicated. This, how do I do this? So I give the 10,000 view that I know Neil's looking for here. The idea, 100,000 foot view of what it is. So the basic idea is there's two salary tables, okay, right? We moved from there being one to now there being two. And the idea was that we would take the existing teachers and sort of sequester them onto a legacy table and then put new teachers on a new table, okay? The old table, meaning the teachers that are our current bargaining unit members, we moved them from the table they were on to one that I believe is like a straight 1.8% per step. Yep. And there's no cost of living increase year over year over year, and the minimum increase that they can receive is, I think, $1,000 in year one. Is that right?
Yes, and that's 700.
Exactly right. So that's the.
Most of them will be getting that. So the rate looks to me like you're talking roughly between 2.2, 2.6% the first year for people that are employed for 1 to 10 years, and then 1.5, 1.8 each of the subsequent 2 years.
Right,
Does that
which
make sense?
it does. And so to be fair, most of the steps that are in a lot of existing contracts are upwards of 3 to even 4%. Plus,
So steps don't matter though, just in terms of your contract, because you're
Well-
talking 1,700, 700, no stepping. I understand you move on to steps after that, but in these first 10 years, it's 1,777 goes at over and above the step.
no. There's a bit of confusion there. It's the greater of 750. Sorry, it's the greater of 1,000, 750, 750.
I understand that.
So.
And in most cases,
Mhm.
1,700, 700 is the greater.
Yes, that's sorry. That is a fair point. You're right. It is the greater of those things, and that's a fairly limiting number, meaning that the steps are actually pretty lightweight. They're small, by comparison to other contracts where it's been 3 to 3.5%, like I've been saying.
That's what I was understood that correctly, okay.
Yeah. So the idea has been for those folks who want to, when you show a 10-year contract at 3.5% steps and you renegotiate every 3 years. Or when people get off the grid, they get to the professional level, and then we start negotiating like separate deals for people to get longevity, or they get $2,000 a year, $1,000 a year. We're basically semantically saying the same thing that you see on that grid, which I presume is in front of you there. That across the diagonal of a teacher's career, from the first year they're a teacher to the 20th year that they've got their master's degree and 30 credits, like that's what they're actually earning down that lower diagonal. So why don't we just make that what the grid is instead of having all this other language that sort of sits on top of it? So. In that regard, it's been greatly simplified, and those are the real numbers that people would wind up making in those cells. Okay.
Any other questions?
No questions about health insurance. That's the other major piece.
Go ahead, talk about it. You want to tell us how well it went this year?
Tell us.
So we only had a 5% GMR, which is better than the year prior. We're still.
Wasn't there someone who had like a less than 1%?
There are people who get reductions in the course of the year, yeah. But again, in a different discussion. There's a lot of stuff that we have questions about for how Health Trust manages their fund and how they rate their plans and those kinds of things. That's not pertinent necessarily to the contract, so I can talk about that separately. But we made several changes to the health insurance benefit for the teachers, namely getting everybody to 80-20 split, instead of the 85-15 for family and two-person and 90-10 on the single. So everybody's moving to 80-10. In return for having done that for existing bargaining unit members, there's a one-time sort of buyout for having done that, meaning the difference between the premiums, right, are paid to them one time. You might think that that's a lateral move, but the point is we're converting incredibly variable costs of health insurance into incredibly fixed costs in terms of a stipend that is there that doesn't change. There's no magnifier or no change in that compensation. It's a fixed amount that they would receive from here on out. So it was a good move to then also make sure that for new bargaining unit members, the ones that don't even work here yet, they would be paying 80-20 on the health insurance.
Do you want to share with folks the buyout plan?
Yeah, so I'm going to misquote the exact percentage breaks here, but the thing with the buyout was that we had a fairly mean buyout contract before.
This is where if you don't take health insurance,
we pay you to not.
Right.
Yeah, as an incentive to go take it with your spouse or through a qualified plan elsewhere, and it was $2,000, which is lean by standards. And so we've changed it to increase as more and more people take out the buyout option. So it's like an incentive on top of an incentive. So I think if 25% of the bargaining unit,
30%.
30% of the, go ahead, do it for a quote,
30%,
yeah.
Yep, 30% of the bargaining unit. The payout for a single plan would be $2,500, and for a family or a two-person would be $5,000.
Which means that everybody that is currently getting the $2,000 buyout would then get the boosted buyout amount. It would all adjust plus anybody new that goes on the plan. Okay.
And if they accept that, they accept it forever. They can never come back in, is that correct?
You mean if they buy out, they can't waffle back and forth, right?
If you accept this 25% or 30% agree to do it, I'm on a two-family plan,
Yes.
I get my $6,000.
Yes.
Do I get any money next year?
If they buy out again next year, then yes, they
So
will
it's
get.
on an annual basis?
Yeah.
I can play the game?
Yeah, oh yeah, and that happens. People will go through census changes is what it is, and so that will happen every single year. We have people on the plan, off the plan.
Oh, people's plans change every
So
year.
let's see, this year I need to make a payment on my yacht, so I'm gonna take the plan, I'm gonna take the buyout.
Yeah.
Next year, the prostate operation that I really needed last year but put off, I'll get that next year, so I won't take the buyout. I mean, aren't people gonna gain this?
So in principle, or sorry, in theory, I hear what you're saying. Yes, in practice, though, that's not at all how it works, because the differential in the price between these two benefits is so vast. The buyout at $2,000 way down here, the total cost of a family plan, right, for premium is like $22,000 or something. Okay, right? So nobody makes a $2,000 yacht payment, but nobody takes $2,000 to go throw at a personal item to get back on the health insurance next year. The loss of that health insurance is too vast. People don't give up that kind of benefit, right? So what ends up happening instead, the reason this buyout would work is if you were in a family with two teachers, for instance, okay, right, and they work in separate districts, they would go with the other district's plan because our buyout provision is better than the other district's buyout plan, okay, right? And they still get the same quality of benefit in that particular case. Or if the buyout gets big enough, then they can go onto a private sector high deductible plan where that buyout winds up covering the high deductible, and then they wind up with a better overall price because the premiums on that other private plan are less than what they're paying for the premium share over here. So, if you want to say it somewhat, frankly, they get squeezed on both sides here. They're now paying more premium in the district, so that's an incentive to look at lower premiums outside of district, right? And they're getting squeezed on both the deductible and on that buyout piece to then incentivize them to go look elsewhere, okay, right? So all of those options are still cheaper than paying $22,000 or more for a family health insurance plan here.
So no matter how much you pay under this plan, the district still makes out?
Absolutely.
That's absolutely the case. Yeah, I think the math is pretty self-evident. You can, for the loss of one family plan, you can buy out currently like 10 individuals. Okay, right? With this change, you can buy between 5 and 6. So it's a pretty good deal.
You haven't given any thought to making it permanent, once out, always out?
No, I don't.
Can't.
I don't know that. I don't know. Well, hold on. I don't actually know the truth of that. There's a lot of things that when you collectively bargain them, they can go beyond the boundaries of ERISA and other kinds of things. So, no, we haven't talked about that. I can tell you that that would not be my prerogative to do so, whether it's illegal or not. It's too draconian in terms of what we would do. So.
Well, they have to buy their way back in.
Yeah, which right. You can understand. Imagine sitting across the table from negotiating teachers and saying, well, "What do you guys think about once you're out, you're never coming back?" Yeah, I know. How fast can they say no? Derail the negotiation, Yeah.
Anything else?
I noticed there's no article that if the contract doesn't pass, you have a second bite.
You noticed.
Oh, yeah.
They're on to us. We kind of heard what you guys said.
That's one of our fan favorites.
Yeah. Are you sure about it? Yeah. No,
That's why it was eliminated.
Yeah, we had about a 10-second conversation on it, and we all said, that was a shitty idea last year. We're not going to do that again this year. So we definitely are not doing it. Yep.
Okay, that's good.
We greatly appreciate that. Nobody else has any other questions? We're good with John Stark?
Oh, I just had one last, the last article. $50,000. How much is in the fund now?
Good question.
What is the last
It's
article?
the roof funding or building and grounds?
The buildings are around
Yeah.
the one that they
The
only.
186.
Some of the unexpended fund balance in there.
I feel like it's 180 something, but I have a lot of numbers in my head.
We can probably email that to you. I could email it to Lori and she can get
That'd
it
be
to
great.
everybody.
Actually, email it to Bill because he disseminates it to everybody.
On that, just quickly on that point, what we did not have ready for this particular budget cycle is a full expression of a capital improvement plan. So about a year from now, I would say in the fall of this upcoming year, what we'd like to be able to share with you and the rest of the taxpayers is, what our 5-year capital improvement plan actually looks like with annual funding.
How did you arrive at 50,000?
So, yeah.
Just sort of number on the wall?
No, it's from two sources. It's from that process. So we looked at the 5 years that are out there. We know what we've got in the fund for now. We know what we want to execute on in the next, 18 months, what's part of the roof and some other maintenance items. So we can pay for some of that out of our existing funds, and we would use this funding here to put into that fund to support things as we go further on down the road. Similarly, we have that unreserved fund balance. We're looking at a projected unreserved fund balance where we think that $50,000 being pledged from that won't disrupt the revenue side of the equation too drastically. So it came from both of those ends to around 50,000.
Anything else? All right, you're good to go.
Wow, thank you guys.
I told you, you got to us at the public
Yeah.
meeting to find here. Oh. Thank you very much, Zach.
Yeah, no, you're welcome, guys. Thank you. You guys know about the deliberative session next. It's like the first week of February, right?
On a Friday
Yeah,
night.
on Friday.
Can I bring popcorn?
Only if you share.
Yeah, I think so.
I can do that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I agree.
Now, Marge, do you have something you'd like to discuss with us?
No, I just want to know if you all have any questions about that warrant article.
What time on Friday? 6?
Seven.
6,
The meeting starts at 6, the board meeting, but the
Deliberative
delivery will
is
be at
7.
7. Yeah.
And where
And it will
is
be in
it?
the cafeteria.
At John Stark.
Can
Okay.
I say that something?
Yeah, John Stark Cafeteria on the 9th of February. Did you put the second one?
Yeah. I'm sure I did. Very busy day.
I was writing down the stuff.
Oh, you just said they got one.
And Weare, that Wednesday night.
Oh,
at
yes, I
7
didn't see
o'clock.
that. I didn't get into it. I know.
So
Sorry.
the
Sorry, days. That's 7 o'clock, sorry.
Now, do you have a meeting at 6 then?
Meetings at 6, and then we move into the cafeteria for the deliberative session.
More popcorn.
Yeah.
Marge, I know you just sat through us, but I can't stay. I have to go back to work.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I would love to stay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Zach.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Simple.
Glad you're good. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, questions on the Weare budget? Neil, you're also our resident question person.
My understanding, this is the 100,000-foot view, is that the school board tried very hard to keep the budget relatively level because they knew that there was going to be a labor contract. They got the pleasant surprise that the teachers rejected the labor contract, and they're stuck with a, let's call it, budget smaller than they would have had there not been a labor contract on the table. The net result is the proposed budget looks pretty good.
Thank you. It is pretty good. In fact, it's very good.
So we should have the teachers reject the contract every year?
No, because then we'll have very unhappy teachers, and we'll have to be hiring new teachers.
When the test scores come up, we might be more positive about that.
Could you just give us the bottom line and approximate numbers, the current budget, the proposed, the default budget, and the proposed budget?
The proposed budget is $15,299,618.
Just the first.
15.3.
Thank you.
And the default budget is $15,138,975.
15.1. Yeah. What's the budget for this year? For 17.
15.3.
Current budget?
Yeah, the current budget.
15,302,946.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And there's no other warrant articles attached to anything.
Yes, there's
We
another
have
warrant
one
article.
warrant article for an expendable trust. Article 4 is $75,000. We're asking to the voters for $75,000 from any surplus remaining at the close of the fiscal year to be added to the school building maintenance expendable trust.
How much do you have in that now?
Actually, it's going to
About
be that.
90,000 was in here.
And we want this money for,
Oh, that's the oil tanks
That's
again.
the boiler. That's the boiler. Again, unfortunately, John Stark and Centerwood were built about the same time. John Stark was built in '87, Centerwood was built in 1990, and both of them have original boilers. So
A few more years to go.
that's right. That's why we're trying to build up a little bit of the savings account so that we'll have enough of this expendable trust to just do that.
But you shouldn't need it.
Oh, this is where that start,
Yeah,
right?
but you shouldn't need the same, why would you put the same kind of system in? Why would you do the same thing?
The board has not discussed what kind of boiler they would put in here.
we haven't, we
Well,
just
why would
want.
you think about doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Well, then you wouldn't need to be planning to have a special trust on that for that purpose.
Can you guys in Weare pull the same thing that the guys in Stark are doing?
That's what
Well, we haven't
Keith
had
was asking.
we were several months behind John Stock in looking at capital funds
But
and
for
all
next
that
year.
stuff. But we're thinking about, but we would like to build up a little bit more reserve in our expendable trust. Because the boiler has to be replaced within 1 to 2 years.
Right, but if you go with the program that John Stark is doing, you wouldn't be building up the expendable, the building maintenance, because the whole thing would cover that. I think is what Keith
That's what I'm asking.
Neil's point is, and the question that I think comes out of our group is, why would we want to build up an account if there's a possibility of going with something like John Stark's for years, because then we're just building up an account that there's no, it's tacking money that we don't get use of, but we would have an energy system coming in like John Stark's into Weare, but there would be this money sitting over there that the taxpayers have paid into, but there it sits and can be used some other time, whereas people could have been hanging on to it. I think that's the game plan we're asking, correct?
Yeah, could I ask Lorraine, do you think that the Weare school situation, the age of the building, the kind of condition of all the systems, et cetera, is amenable to the same thing they did at Stark?
I think so, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Somebody wanted to know what was in that trust fund.
That was me.
$99,729.89.
And the only thing I'll just add to the conversation is that we have 2 buildings that we have to maintain and repair in the Weare School District. We have the middle school.
How old is the middle school?
10 years.
10 years.
10 years. Little-
So at 10 years, it should be
No, it's actually older than that now.
fairly functional,
Oh, it is, but
is,
things go wrong.
but I shouldn't hear about repairing a heating system like that.
Oh, no, that's at Centerwoods, not at Weare Middle, but we had, let the pump go, right? And that was a fairly pricey
Pricey.
item.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
Stuff breaks.
unpredictable maintenance costs, even if you have a house that's 10 or 12 years old. So, as I said, I'm just saying, we have 2 buildings that we have to care for, to be good stewards.
And Kathleen's always more comfortable if we have about 150,000 in that expendable
Yeah, and it's-
trust in case of some kind of an emergency. So, I mean, supposing something happened to the boiler
Insurance
before we
kicks in.
get,
But don't you have the legal authority either to spend money in emergencies
Mhm.
by going to either DOA or
Yes.
DRA,
Yes.
and, or that you can call a special town meeting?
You can't.
So if the money isn't there and the boiler blows, you're gonna take care of the boiler and worry about the money some other time, and you have the legal ability to.
The fact of the matter is, if the boiler blows, we have insurance. You can't tell me that they don't. If they don't, there's something wrong. Because if my boiler in my house blows, my insurance policy would cover that. So regular maintenance, that's something that they pay for, but if you have something catastrophic, like suddenly your roof collapses or your boiler explodes, there's an insurance policy somewhere, you have to carry insurance, that would pay for that. They wouldn't need a meeting for that at all. That's
Okay.
where your insurance policies come in. Sorry, I wasn't an insurance person. Anybody have any other questions? How are we doing on enrollment? Just, okay, we know that the high school's coming down. And what is the grade school, middle school? So this nice thing going down, I'm gonna see in a couple of years.
We're
it's gonna
going
go-
up.
Right, so.
Gradual, it's very
Gradual. But we had 20 first graders in September that we hadn't expected. At least in August.
20 kids
Yeah.
moved in,
And our enrollment.
all in first grade.
So with
Yeah.
John starts going down, eventually they're gonna come back up.
Nothing I'll move on.
And you'll hang a shingle on the schools for the grade school saying now the enrollment has to go down. All in case of that per year.
The Weare situation is reflected in the statewide trends. We're told that the 15-year decline is over, it's slowing down, and some are up and some are down, it's slowing down, and will start picking up at some relatively near future point.
Yeah.
So you might see another bump up this year.
Taxes go up.
I think it's the millennials are finally settling down.
Yeah.
And then they hit the wall of, I'm in my late 30s, I gotta have my kids now.
Yeah.
But they don't stay home,
But
take
your
care of
overall
the kids they want.
enrollment, your overall enrollment is down, not up.
I'm sorry?
The overall enrollment in elementary school is down, not up.
In the elementary school.
Which is what you're just talking about. Where you said first grade top by 20, kindergarten went down by 20, and the overall enrollment went down by 20 in the elementary school.
It did, yes.
Do you have the population?
I have no idea. I'm not making these numbers up, you gave them to me.
That's my
I'm not shooting from the hip here.
Which is why we love it when Keith sits on the school boards. So we see it.
The population went down in the elementary school. How about in the middle school, the same, it's gone down?
Middle school is about the same, 346 last year, 344 now. Or last of October, yeah.
Now, how many students do you average per class in middle school?
We've got,
Or is it depend upon because all the different classes you offer that it doesn't always balance out?
our average class size right now is about 24 kids.
And when you say the middle school, you mean the
Sixth, seventh,
6th,
eighth.
7th, and 8th grade students in that building? And when you say the elementary school, you mean grades 1 through 5, wherever they're located?
Plus kindergarten.
K-5, yep.
K to 5.
Yep.
And we're down one principal right now. One is on leave,
We have somebody on the train.
and then we have, I never remember her name. She looks like Peter Pan.
Sean's been, yes.
Yes, Neil?
Congratulations on the $25,000. What are you guys going to do with it?
That's up to the
What did you get paid for?
elementary school, Center Woods.
So it's not within the school board's control?
The school board accepted the $25,000 grant, and because it was an Intel grant, so the expectation is you're going to at least buy some technology, right? And what the principal wanted to do and got school board approval is to have the students have a voice in how a slice of that is going to be spent. So they're all coming up with creative ideas as how they can, there's.
Well, they earned it, so yeah, that's nice. Now, what did they get it for? What did they do?
One of our parents, who lives in Weare, whose children go to Centerwoods, works for Intel.
Okay.
There was a competition in the United States and Canada for these teams of workers who, so Intel, Best Buy has it, Target has it, Walmart has it, any place that sells Intel, they can come up with these teams. And is it based on sales? Is that
I
right?
believe so, yeah.
So this particular team, who works out of Best Buy in Manchester, They won 2 or 3 years ago, and it went to one school, and they said, "Okay, this year, it's your turn." And they won the largest prize.
Why did they give it to where? Are they from where?
The dad's kids go to Centerville.
Okay, okay.
And what is the product they were selling? Or just Best Buy products that may
Intel.
have included Intel components?
No, it's products that have Intel in their operating system.
Got it.
Very nice.
There was a story, I was trying to find it here on my phone, but it's not here. There was a great article in the Monitor
Yes.
recently,
It's right here in the messenger.
and then the Messenger.
I have to read that. Very nice.
Yeah.
And we almost, just so you know, we almost didn't get it because when it came through, it looked like spam.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, it did, it looked like spam and it was,
We went
We
to
went
check it out to
out-
make sure it was authentic.
we went to a lot of hoops to make sure that it was
Where they
real.
build things.
And because it did look like spam.
Robotics?
No,
Oh, the invention
that's
convention.
it.
That's,
Do such fast.
February
February
16th.
16th.
Yeah.
And the middle school is February 7th.
You'll love it. It's
And
absolutely.
if you'd like to be a judge, we can
Next
sign
year,
it.
next year I'm not going to go away.
Okay, yeah, no, it is the neatest thing to,
Yeah, I think so.
when you actually get sorted out, the children that actually did their project without some help,
Yeah.
it's amazing to listen to them
Talk
talk
about
about
it,
it,
yeah.
and
It's fabulous.
they get excited about it, it's just fun.
Yeah, the Jimmy Fallon thing, wasn't it?
Yes, we had two of our Centerville students on the Fallon, yeah, for their inventions.
Yeah, they were incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really neat. It's a fun experience. If
I love
any of
the
you
little
get asked
one
to
she
go
put-
judge, definitely do that.
Yeah, and he used the same joke last time. Yeah, where are you from? We're New Hampshire. Where?
She was so sweet.
Any other questions?
I got just one that's not completely unrelated to anything this
That's
year.
okay.
Has there been any push for a full-day kindergarten?
That's a great question. Marge might be able to answer that one for you.
We're having a feasibility study tonight, so we would like to have full-day kindergarten very much.
If you do, then you're gonna have a problem with space at Centerville, right?
Yep.
No,
No?
no, Lorraine and Jess have done a walkthrough and it will be possible.
Okay, I'll leave that one there. That's kind of.
We have to ensure that we have wet classrooms for kindergarten. And although we would have to probably
Well,
do
there's,
a lot of,
well, there's costs associated because you have more, additional teachers, right? It's
oh,
four.
yeah,
It'll be a
oh,
cost,
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
but we won't need to build a building or an addition. We have the space by,
But the cost will not be covered by Keno. Enough of that cost won't be absorbed by gambling. It'll still hit the
Oh, no, no.
taxpayer.
Oh, absolutely. It would,
Yeah.
I mean, we had talked about putting on a potential warrant article.
Well, that would go, even if you eventually get to that point, it would go out for a warrant.
yeah,
One of my nieces is actually a psychologist, and she's adamantly against this because they feel that children at that age, there's a group that actually can take full capacity learning that length of time, but they find that from her studies, what she's done, and they've studied with Harvard, and they've done some stuff out in California, that they're finding that children are not being allowed to be children enough, and that they're being pushed more. And part of the question that has been raised by different people is this more about babysitting for parents
Well,
than
I
actually
don't
for our kids?
want to.
It's not on the warrant.
So why'd you bring it up?
Well, I always want to know if there's a truck coming over.
Not this year.
I hear a diesel noise, and I kind of was wondering what it was.
Yes, ma'am.
If you use this extra space for kindergarten and the Weare population does what everyone expects it to do, starts climbing, what are you going to do for space?
Will we have room at the middle school?
So basically, what you're saying is the space that we now have that could deal with an expected expansion in the student population will be diverted to kindergarten, and we will have to build an addition to the elementary school or in addition to the middle school sooner than we otherwise would.
No, this is where we encourage more parents to do homeschooling or send them out to a different school so that they're not here.
No,
No.
that's not what we encourage.
That solves that whole building problem.
They'll have to reverse their thinking. They sent me a letter saying, well, I understand they oppose the Senate bill that would provide more money for children to take their adequacy aid to go to private school or homeschool.
We'll just have to encourage that. I don't want to build onto the schools. We'll go broke.
You'll hear more as we put it all together, and we didn't have enough time to put a washout this year for it.
That's okay.
But in hindsight, this is probably the best year to do that. I mean, you didn't know it.
But we didn't expect,
Yeah.
The teachers didn't get, right?
we did not.
Why did anybody like it?
Yeah, why what happened? They weren't happy.
I was just told, like, the only information I received was from the union president that said it had been rejected. I did not, it's a vote that they take in private, and we weren't privy to.
Because 2 years ago, I mean,
Did you ask? And they said no, not to tell you?
He said it was a private vote.
So does that mean they'll have different representatives next year? I mean, it was their representatives that negotiated the contract, wasn't it?
The word that I heard was regressive.
you're still losing teachers at the same rate as before, like they got this
No,
last contract. Or that
no,
last
no.
contract helped stem that time.
It did, it absolutely did. So we're in the middle of conducting a retention study in terms of,
Ray and I just looked at the figures today about how many teachers she hired last year and why.
Yeah.
I think there were 5.
5, and
3 of them had to do with retirements.
2 were retirements, 1 was a non-renewal.
One was,
Non-renewal.
And 2 left of their
2
own
left
volition.
also.
So we
Yeah.
only hired 5 teachers
for 6.
in all of Weare.
That
As
doesn't.
opposed to
It's
12 or
unusually
15 that it has been.
Unusually low,
Yes.
which I think speaks to 2 issues. The first one being that we finally were able to make some strides in the teacher contract last time around to lift that beginning salary, because it was $29,000 and change for a beginning teacher group. And now we're 34, 35, yeah, 3, it's in that ballpark.
Yeah.
So that has helped.
And do I understand that there is a shortage of teachers?
Every year, the DOE puts out a critical shortage list. So there are some areas where there are shortages of teachers.
Is it still science, math, and special ed?
Special ed, world language.
Yeah.
Are there a shortage of, or a smaller number of teacher openings? In other words, is the market for, are the number of teachers that are available declining because nobody's hiring teachers? The population, not in some states.
I think it's more that there are certain
Areas.
content areas, particularly at the high school level and special education at the elementary, that are more difficult to fill.
Special ed is big and it requires a lot of extra education because it is a special field.
And if you know anyone who wants to be a speech pathologist, encourage them,
Yeah.
because we can't find them. I had 3 openings for speech pathologists across the SAU. Haven't been able to fill them.
Is it possible to circumvent that problem in the way that we've tried to deal with the shortage of doctors by allowing less well-prepared people do some of the tasks that don't require the same skill level? So you've got nurses doing some things that doctors used to do. You've got, what do they call it, physician's assistants.
And
Hey,
we
yeah,
have
we have
speech,
that.
we have speech assistants. We can't hire them either.
Oh, can you take an untrained person and relatively quickly give them some level of training so they can do some of these things.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to go back and finish the warrant articles, or do you want to hold them until next week?
Let's finish the warrant
Let's
articles.
get the pre-lunch done. Thank you very much.
The Old Town Hall was the last one we covered.
My old town hall,
Yeah, we had 6 yeses and 1 big no.
that would be me. Okay, so now I guess we have the ever exciting warrant.
Library.
Oh, sure. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think my secretary has made multiple folders, right? I gave you 3 in Star, right? But absolutely, I can send you everything from John Stark and everything from Weare.
Can you send it to me in the mail or through the job, through email or how?
They can do it through again.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay, the library wants 25,000 this year and for 3 years after that.
Okay, yeah, then I'll
We
remember.
rejected that unanimous. Go
When
ahead.
you send in your question, send it here and
Oh, okay.
Nancy,
Kathleen, okay,
okay?
okay.
Now, do you have the email to send them that?
I'll send Kathleen some.
Okay.
I think it was only asking what the
Thank you.
balance was.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we said I don't know, I'll read it, yeah.
Everybody still a no on this?
Where are we?
Which one?
The library,
Yes.
you're a yes?
No, I'm still a no. That's what you asked. Is everyone still a no? The proper answer would be yes. I'm still a no.
So we're 7 no's. Cemetery, does this come out of their fund?
No, this one comes out of taxes.
This one they raised. The only thing I added in there, nobody ever asked how much is in that fund.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, we never asked them.
I give, it's just coming.
So it's just maybe, I don't know, maybe.
Thank you.
Thank you
say,
very
we'll
much.
have another meeting Monday night, whatever. We keep just throwing 10,000.
I'll call
every
Beth
year.
and ask her.
Yeah, how much is in it? I thought that note in there, because I said, when I was making up the notes, I said, how much is in that fund? I know, but you keep adding money to it, I don't know. what is in
So
it.
are we still,
They do spend every day.
They do?
They do. That's what
are we
it's all
still
about.
on unanimous yeses on this or not?
I have a
I'll
question.
abstain from that.
Okay, go ahead.
Why can't they use the money in the Cypre account to pay?
Apparently it's not
It's a
allowed.
different account that does not allow to work on walls, it only works on inside the tent cemetery, but the walls are not considered part of the inside of the cemetery.
All right, that makes sense. No, oh, whatever.
Yep, that's usually what I read.
Okay,
Vote on 17, 16.
5 to 10.
who are the no's?
Which one?
No.
Well, I was an abstain till I know how much is in the fund. I just being, trying to be practical.
I'm
that's it.
a no on it person.
No wells for cemeteries.
So what's the vote?
511.
Thank you.
Article 17, this is the Cypress account.
Cypre.
Great.
It's French for Latin.
Press.
Let's pray. Just say it.
It has no tax impact, so I'm guessing
Yes. 7-0.
fireworks.
We
What can-
split
What
4
can
to
this be
2.
done through fundraising?
What?
Fireworks.
I happen to like fireworks.
I like fireworks too, but
That's a.
why does the taxpayer pay for it?
Every town I've lived in does, and I think it's fine because I pay for so many other things as a taxpayer, but I don't get anything out of it.
That was all I do.
But you pocket other things, so that argument doesn't make sense.
I like fireworks, so I'm good.
I'm still no.
Yeah, I'm a no.
3 no's, yes.
I'm gonna go no now.
Well, the town will go against everything and vote for it
Well,
because they
I
like
just said, my comments just said, it's up to each voter individually, you know, it's just something that.
This is why you guys vote on it every year.
Just write it down.
That's right.
3-4, not all the committee can get it, right now, 3-4.
When the carnival came in,
What's
they said, we're
3-4?
not coming back next year unless you have them because it draws bigger crowds and they make
Right.
more money.
Right.
They had us by the throat, let's
And
face
they
it.
probably will say the same thing this year.
Yeah, they say it every year.
Okay, conservation.
So that was a 3-4, no.
Bring back the fiddler contest.
3 to 4, no.
3-4, no.
Fiddler's contest.
Nobody asked me, Nancy, show of hands, on fireworks.
Why, you say no?
For yes?
Yes.
We got 3, and we got
How do you count me out?
1.
4 yes?
Thank
Oh,
you.
no.
Oh.
Okay, conservation is a no-brainer, it's no
Alright.
tax impact, so that's 7, yep.
Wait a sec. No,
You know?
I'm a no.
Okay.
Why?
Because we buy all this conservation land and there's no benefit to the townspeople.
Sure there is.
What's the trail network?
There's all kinds of trail networks.
It comes out of the town forest account.
I mean, and then there are stewards of the land, and they create the stewards.
It's been asked a couple of times of the selectmen that they tried, and they have tried, to put together some kind of trail committee. And so far, for the last 2 years, nothing's happened with it. So all this public land that,
But it takes time to build those trails, and you gotta get people together. I mean, I know the Conservation Commission has been trying to get people from the kids from the high school to get involved and start, forging those trails, but it's.
Neil?
There are other reasons for having conservation law. One of the reasons, not the only one, that the school population isn't going up is because not as many houses are being built. Because some of the land that could be used for development has been put in conservation. To some extent, conservation land is a land bank. If, God forbid, in the future, we need to grow more of our own food, we're preserving that land, setting it aside for that kind of a possibility. So
It also keeps us as a more rural
it keeps
which is what we like being.
the visual aspect. So it's not just, oh, well, it's only for trails.
well, but I mean, for me, I'm speaking for myself in this case, I see no benefit to it. So, for me, I'm a no.
Which is fine. Move on.
Everybody else is yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, everybody else is yes or no. I think John is yes or no too.
It's been a long night.
Okay, we were 6-1. The one before that was 7-0, right?
Right.
The one, yeah, okay.
No.
19 was 6-1.
19 was 6-1. Now
Wait a
we're
minute, wait a
No,
minute.
19
Wait a
was
minute.
3-4.
Forest management?
No.
Forest
18
management
was
was.
3-4.
Right,
Yeah,
Right
19 was 6-1.
apologize.
We're on 20 now, right?
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, I just want to make sure the one before the one we just talked about was 7-0.
No.
17 was 7-0.
17 was 7.
I'm not looking at the right thing, okay.
Come on.
Let me go to.
Okay, I'm voting no against 20.
Okay.
Right, the one, Article 19, what was the vote on that?
We never talked about it.
6-1.
We just talked about
No,
it.
I voted no against
That's what we just
20.
talked about.
No, we talked about you started with 150.
Yes, I'm talking about the
We were talking
$150,000.
about-
we were talking
We
about
were talking about 19, John.
Okay,
Did you still know?
I'm no against 20.
Okay, but we
What
know
are you
that's
doing
on
with
19.
19? You can't go to 20.
I'm glad I raised this issue. I was on 19 and a
Okay,
half.
let's just move on.
Okay.
19, let's read it, please. I just want to move on to this.
19 is $30,000 to allow the Conservation Committee to contract with town's licensed forester to prepare forest management plans, secure contract services for town maintenance.
See, that I have a problem.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that,
trail.
This is your comment.
so that's a yes. So now 20 is where you have the issue.
So you were a yes on 19?
19, I have a yes.
Oh,
All right.
Jesus, okay.
What was that?
7-0.
7-0.
20, I don't know.
See,
Is that right? You're right, we're on the side.
And the other, and 20 is 6-1. Got it.
Yep.
Okay,
Article
Wait,
21.
hold on a second.
got it, 6-1.
No, I just want to, I'm not joining on this one, this is a different one.
Oh, okay.
Toward the purchase of new town forest land and fund appropriation. So your reasoning here is you just don't want more like going to conservation, basically?
Yeah,
Okay.
because to me, the conservation land doesn't benefit me And I still don't see how it affects the taxpayers with all the other amount of land we have in conservation.
Well, if you have more houses being built on it, the tax.
I'm still saying yes, so 6-1.
Okay, Pine Hill Road abutting property to discontinue.
I don't think we can take a position on that.
We did
All right, then we
we
don't.
did not 22 either,
And we didn't, I'm 22 either.
23 were all the 6.
We don't do 23, do we?
There was discussion on that last time because
Well, that's right, it would have a tax impact.
Neil's comment, we actually voted 6-0 to not recommend 23, and the reasoning was would allow the Board of Selectmen expanded authority to dispose through auction of sealed bid all tax deeded property. Such sales are currently size restricted. Sale of larger parcels must be approved by the voters.
Thank you.
And it's the consensus of the committee that things are working fine now. When it comes to larger parcels, the committee feels all residents should have a say. Such sales and subsequent development can have an impact on the historical character of the town.
Yep.
Is it within the purview of the finance committee to make a recommendation on this when it has no tax impact?
Yes, it does. If it allows the Board of Selectmen to sell land willy-nilly, it definitely has an impact on taxes for us.
You're right in one sense, John. It doesn't have an immediate impact on
Correct.
taxes this year.
Correct.
But what we're doing is setting up a process that would affect the amount of money that the selectmen can raise by selling property without the consent of voters. So the question really is, do you want to make sure that the voters continue to have a say in the sale of these larger parcels, or do you want the selectmen to be able to do that on their own and raise money from the sale of those parcels and use it, for example, as revenue for various budget purposes?
And you can't always assume.
So forgive me because I'm tired, my brain shut down about an hour ago. What is the current,
They can only sell small parcels, less than 5 acres,
they can only sell less than 5 acres?
without town vote permission.
Okay.
And we like to keep it that way.
And they're asking for
They want to be able to do whatever they want.
no matter, regardless of the size?
So like a 500 acre parcel, they can just go ahead and sell it, possibly to a developer, for instance.
Basically, they don't want to be involved with what the town wants. They're more concerned about what they want.
So you, yes?
It's basically whether you want to, I guess, trust the selectmen to execute the wishes of the town.
So that's not
Right.
right.
Well, that's why those people are elected, not to do that. But,
Fair enough, but this is the case where you can't say what the wishes of the town are, because
yeah, I know, yeah, you got 5 people who will determine that. I just think that the character of the town is important, and it's something that, hey,
Yes.
how often does this come up? Why is it even coming up now?
I don't know, it definitely came up, well, it wasn't counted, but it could have come up on Flanders Road.
Maybe the selectmen know something that we don't.
Exactly, that's right.
I can tell you.
There you go.
There's a push, and I'll tell you too, town council said that you don't have a recommendation on that. But there's a push to put a lot of properties that were tax deeded back on for sale, to put them back on the tax rolls.
But large properties.
Properties in general. I don't know, there's only like one large parcel that, and it's on a road that's class 6 at best.
Well, there's just one, they want to do it, why are they making a warrant article to do it, not having to screw around with this?
We have the authority to do it, they just wanted to do it on a, not be confined to the acreage in the, if we take a piece of property that has a home on it, that has a large parcel on it, then you can't put it back on the records.
And yes, you can, but you have to have vote of the town.
Right.
What's wrong with that?
I'm not saying there's anything wrong, you asked what the push was, I answered why,
I said,
and I also transferred to you that town council says you don't have a vote or
Right, but we
recommendation.
can give a recommendation if we want.
It won't be printed, I'm sure. I mean, you guys can.
But still, I'm still not, the point you didn't answer, is if there's one particular parcel that is under that's being impacted by this.
I don't know that there's one particular one, Keith, right
Well,
now.
okay, let's say there's 2 or 3. If there are particular parcels that are already impacted, why don't we just put that onto the warrant article? We want to sell A, B, and C.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but there is none right now that we're thinking of.
There are none, you're thinking of.
No.
Oh.
No, there's just a whole parcel that they want to put back out there in the
So they're just
spring.
trying to be proactive?
I mean, that was just, it was a suggestion that there was when it was put on originally, there was some restrictions. But there's nothing, you know what I mean, we can every year take tax deeded property, and we don't know what size and how much. But there is the thought that we have taken for several years, and in the spring, we're gonna have an auction of several pieces. It's not, there's nothing targeted for anything, there's nothing, and if you look through in the town report, all the property is there. If you look through that whole list, there's really only maybe one that might sum up to be a large parcel, but I think, you know, to put a road in, and it's a class 6 road, to upgrade it would be, you know, I don't know if not cost prohibitive, but it'd be very expensive. And that's something that we took like several years ago. It's nothing that we took in the immediate future, I mean the immediate past.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think townspeople should be doing business.
Yeah, but we're not.
It doesn't matter.
We have no.
Well, here, I like this one, it's, you know, Finance Committee ordinance. The board recommends it.
What was the vote on 24?
We were talking 23.
It's not gonna matter anyway, but I don't.
I'm sorry, what was the vote on 23?
We didn't take an official vote.
We had one before, 6-0.
It was 06 before.
Right. So what is it this time?
I have no problem with it.
I'm still against it, so it's 1-6.
1-6, thank you.
Now, I know there's no money on the Finance Committee ordinance article, but it's very poorly thought out. They haven't thought of the ramifications. They haven't checked with the committee who runs the,
They don't want me, they're just wondering it. That's the bottom line.
you know, they're certainly not going after the board of fire wards. They seem to have an issue with us. But if that's what happens, then we put in a budget committee, and then they won't have any bills. 25?
I guess my question that I didn't get a chance to ask is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, on 25.
Okay.
What happens to the existing exercise equipment that's in there now?
Currently,
Because it's owned by the police department, is it not?
correct, so the police department would keep it.
Okay.
No, he's been moving it, that was what he said.
No, the police department owns the current exercise equipment.
He said they were moving it. That's what he said.
Well, the fire department is moving into the fire department.
The equipment was moving because the space is gonna, this is what he said, the space is gonna be utilized for locker rooms for the women and men.
Right, well, right now, from what I understand, having talked about fire and PD, the equipment belongs to PD.
Well, God's hope
It's going to move because it's going to be a locker room where PD's going to put their up and down equipment, I have no idea. But fire's putting something together on their side. It's a community area and suddenly fire's not part of the community. I think that's a little weird, but you know, it's a never-ending saga.
So, yes.
But I have no problem letting them spend their money. It's their money. So I'm a yes. I don't know if you vote on this.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, no problem.
And I don't think we do anything about the hammerhead. That has no tax impact, does it?
No. What is it?
It's technically, it's a loss of, it's a town property that's reverting back to somebody.
You know what I mean?
Basically, there's a turnaround that used to be at a certain part of Pine Hill, but the road got extended. So on the tax map, there's a turnaround there called a hammerhead. But that doesn't exist anymore. because
People
the
were
road-
52 did Pine Hill Road want that property back to be theirs.
Right.
Yep.
There's a house there now, so it's gonna go back to that.
So that property.
Just, can I add something?
Sure.
That article you'll notice is by petition.
Yes.
That article is the same article that is 21. What happened was, that petition came in, and if you read how it's worded, if it passes, it means nothing. Because you can't turn it around.
Oh,
says that.
So let me just tell you let me just tell you what happened. The petition came in December thinking it was gonna go on as a zoning change.
Okay.
The zoning change, it's not a zoning change. There is nothing to do with zoning. They didn't really know how to attack it. So how the rule of thumb works now is the petition came in with 25 signatures. And now we've decided that 50 by 50 turnaround isn't necessary. So that's why we put on our article. So in order to take the petition off there, he has to get those exact 25 or 26 people to sign a withdrawal that they want to withdraw their name. He can't just get 25 new people, he has to get the exact same people. The problem that he's having is that it was done in early, right around November and December. People were here, now people have gone to Florida and kids have gone back to school. He can't duplicate the same. So the idea is it still has to go on, but the idea is there may or may not, he's discussed with us, an amendment on the floor to direct you back to Article 21. Because you can make an amendment on the floor at deliberative session.
Right.
So it's theoretically the same property, theoretically the same thing. He wasn't sure how to approach it. He came in with a petition. I can't throw the petition away without having the exact number of people withdraw.
Right.
So that's why it's on there.
So 21 is a better worded version of 20.
21 is a better worded, and then, but still, after this, if 21 passes, you'll still have to go to the planning board for a lot line adjustment.
Right.
But it's a cleaner way of doing it because it was deeded to us.
Yep.
Right.
So you can't just turn, if you just look at the wording, it just says to remove the hammerhead. We're gonna remove the hammerhead, but it's not owned by him. The hammerhead's owned by us.
Oh, okay.
So not sure how to do it, he brought in a petition by December deadline, thinking it was gonna go on zoning.
Clearly by the way it's worded.
Yeah, and it's not. So it doesn't do what it wants, but at the same time, everybody needs to know it's the same article. It's not two different ones.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
The only reason it's on there now is because he couldn't come back with a petition to remove the names because people are in Florida or they're away at school.
Okay. All right, we're done with the warrant articles. Do you want to take a preliminary vote on the default and proposed budget for the town? Yes, but John didn't get a chance to weigh in.
I guess I'll do it.
So what did we do with this last time?
We didn't like it. It was 6-0. Budget, I tried to capture what was said. I'll read it. The proposed budget of $6.08 million represents a 6.6% increase over the 2017 operating budget. The default budget of $6 million represents a 5.1% increase over the 2017 budget. Board of Selectmen amended the default budget to reflect concerns our committee expressed on 3 January. However, no changes have been made to the proposed budget. The committee believes a 6.6% increase is not warranted and would present an unnecessary burden on taxpayers. The committee is seeking a more responsible proposed budget, $5.88 million. That would be, which would represent a 3% increase. I think we discussed a 2% and a 3% increase. I used the upper level. It is noteworthy that the 2017 budget, which was reduced by $106,000 deliberative session to $5.71 million, was for all practical purposes the same as the 2016 $5.69 million proposed budget, approved budget. Additionally, the Board of Selectmen indicated there is more unexpended funds available this year than last to help reduce the tax impact. It is therefore the sense of the committee that additional cuts could be made in the proposed budget.
Okay, so are we still against the proposed budget?
I saw the same sentiment, yes, and in fact, Tom reiterated, he said we basically, the $200,000 that we already know we don't need. Which is pretty much what we're talking about here.
Yep. John, how do you feel?
That money's gonna go back to the fund, right? That $200,000
Well,
goes back into that
They
general fund.
don't have to.
Oh, that doesn't have to. I thought that's what he said.
No, bottom line,
He said that's what they would do, but
That's what they would
I
do.
don't understand why they wouldn't put that, if that's what they're gonna do, why don't they budget that, and put it in the budget?
yes. they were not happy with the decrease last year, but they've got 200,000 left over,
Right.
which tells you that,
And on top of that, we cut 100,000 into the delivery session last year.
correct.
On top of that.
The default budget is still going to give them 5%.
Where did that $200,000 savings, if you will, from this year happen? I can't see it quickly. You said we didn't spend 200,000, there was a surplus of 200,000, what didn't get spent?
Well, it's a trade-off, it's not just the budget, it's also the revenue.
Okay.
Maybe not, specific.
A lot of it.
Part of it.
There's about $100,000 that didn't get spent out of the budget. The rest is the extra revenue unanticipated that we didn't anticipate.
Okay.
The extra $107,000 is anticipated revenues that we didn't anticipate that would come in through December. So our revenues were higher than what we thought we were going to get, and that's why you got $209,000.
Two questions based off of that, and if you can't answer it right now, I understand. Do we know where those extra 107,000 additional revenue that was not being counted on came from? What?
Probably a good share of it's motor vehicles.
Okay.
We also had, we've had some people buy back their taxes that we took for deed.
Okay.
So what happens is, that's unanticipated. We had some of that in December. So if you lost your home to a tax deed, you have the option of buying it back. So they pay for all the back years of taxes. So we did transfer back probably 3 or 4 pieces of property, I can find them definitely, back that we weren't getting money for.
Okay.
So we weren't anticipating selling those back this year.
Okay.
But what happens, can I just show you?
Sure.
So what happens is, somebody comes in and loses their property even though we've notified the mortgage holder. So we put in a tax deed. The mortgage holder, for some reason, all of a sudden, a year later, might discover that, oh my God, we don't own it anymore. So they contact us looking for a payoff. So what they do is they look for a payoff. We give them a payoff for however many years back it was. Typically, it's 3 years back because it's 3 years before we deed it. So it could be 3 or 4 years back. So you've got a substantial amount of money. And then we deed it back. Once the taxes are paid, we deed it back to the former owner. And typically what I've seen happen, and I hate to say it, but what I see happen is the bank then forecloses on them. So we weren't intending on, because out of a phone call, generated can be, I'd like a tax payoff on such and such property. So you go back to what they owed you for years' taxes to current, and it brings them up to current. Then you get that one big check and you deed it back to them. So we re-deeded several pieces of property this year that we weren't anticipating on.
Okay.
So that's a good share of it. I think motor vehicles came in over what we thought. I think the 1.82, 1.85, maybe, I don't remember the number exactly, but that was higher at the end of the year than we anticipated. I do know probably between those two is probably the majority of it.
Okay. Was there any one large item that accounted for the fact that we did not spend $100,000 out of the budget?
I'll say it generally, and that is because of hirings.
Okay.
Vacant positions, Benji just filled his 2 late fall. Excuse me, he had 1 leave. Police department, as you know, there's still 2 in the works. Hasn't been filled yet. So largely it's unfilled spots.
How's that coming?
I haven't heard any more, Lori. I don't have an update, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the $200,000 that, I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. Keith, thank you. The $200,000 that you were talking about, half of that is from...
I know, but we're not talking about $200,000.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to work this out in my mind.
Okay.
So, and are the selectmen going to be doing anything with the budget Monday night?
I think we've done all we're gonna do. I mean, we were waiting on the last piece, as he shared with you tonight,
Okay.
which that happened this week, which is why we were able to change numbers about the restructuring for my secretary.
So they're actually talking about $77,000, right, in the default and proposed? Tom?
Okay.
Okay. I just threw the 200 number out, but that's a number that
Yep.
Tom was
Okay.
throwing on.
Okay, so how do we stand on this for the proposed? We've got 6 no's so far, are you a yes or no?
And the other problem, John, I had, I guess I we weren't here last time, was the way they did the default budget. So
I've heard,
they
I
included
saw
some,
the select.
they included some substantial,
Yeah.
contract changes that I personally feel should be voted on by the townspeople, just like all the other, contracts are. So
I'm
it's
not-
more of a protest vote than a specific, number.
I'm not 100% sold on the way they came up with their default numbers. And that bothers me, because it seems like they didn't follow the letter of the law the way I understand it, the way I've heard it explained. So I think the default budget is just inflated to make the proposed look better, but I'm okay with the proposed. I'm more okay with the proposed than I am the default. So.
Okay, 6-1. All in
I'm
favor?
no. I'm in the,
Okay, I'm a no.
No.
You're a no? Alan's a no, so we're a 1-6 on this. 1 yes and 6 no.
Yeah.
I don't know, no, I'm gonna go.
Do we want to talk about schools at all?
I don't think so, I think I'll let that go. I think,
I'd like copies of the school paperwork, just so I can.
You're gonna send me, so I can send it out.
Okay, because I have nothing to work about.
Yeah,
So I
that's
can't
how I
make a
felt,
decision.
yeah. But, I'll send it to you, Bill.
good.
Send everything to Bill and Bill will send everything to everybody.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, so are we good to go and we will wrestle this out next Wednesday and finish these recommendations and be done?
Lori, can I just ask a question?
Is Matt going to take a crack now based on Bill's minutes?
That's in London.
Matt's in London at the moment.
I thought you said he was going to help us write up the
Not
bill.
until he gets back.
Which is when?
March.
8th of February is supposed to be back.
But the deliberative session is the 10th.
Correct,
7th and
And
the 10th.
we need something for the 10th.
correct.
How soon do we have to get things to you, Naomi,
For?
for the recommendations on deliberative session?
Which is
You have to have them the 10th.
Okay. So we've got time. But we need to get,
Is Matt going to be able to help us if he comes back on the 8th?
we're going to gamble that he isn't and start working on it.
Got
That's
it.
why we're doing this Wednesday.
3 years ago, Anderson had a developed thing. And I volunteered to develop some narrower words than what I got here, to try and capture what we said. I can start doing that now,
I
because
mean,
I know
as
what,
much as
I know
we
what.
love Matt, I think.
But then,
we
if I can do
have to
that by
go 2 days
next
before.
Wednesday when we come in, I can give a copy to everybody, and you can then have it.
That would be great.
Or if I put it out to everybody, and then you could come in and tell me what words you want changed.
Did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, the only thing, just a point of order, you have never approved any of your minutes. Everything that you've posted, typically you go over the set of minutes from the last meeting and vote on them, if there's any changes.
Yeah, you can, that's
Yeah.
correct. That's
Because or else they stay in draft forever.
So let's take a vote. I
Okay.
move that we approve all our minutes.
Second.
Well, you don't have to do it now, you can meet it the next time, but you should go back and see what's in draft and clean them up if you want to.
But cleaning them up means simply removing the word draft?
That means rewrite them.
Well, no,
If you choose.
I mean, if you've read them and you're fine with it, then that's fine, but if there's spelling errors and you're fine with it, then it's a reflection of you, but that's okay. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, it's easier if you can, and you can do whatever you'd like. You can do whatever you'd like, I'm just saying that if you approve them by the date.
Right, I remember now when I wasn't doing this, that the guy I lived on was with us for 1 year, he did them, and he always called them draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Because we didn't approve them last year.
Yeah.
Well, that's what my point is, and you can do what you want. It's just easier if you say, I approve this set, and by date. You don't have to list individually, you can make one motion, but you should list the dates that are in draft.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve them, and that's just, I'm just saying,
Thank you.
point of order was just to make it,
We'll
make it cleaner.
Next meeting.
Yeah, 'cause
Because what we get strapped with, and I'll just share with you, is somebody comes in and says, can I have the minutes? And then you look at draft and they're like, well, I'd like the final set. Well, a year or two later, they're like, this is all we got. You know what I mean? So a
Yeah.
point of order is just to do them. And I'm just saying, if it was a year ago, even include those in your motion and just clean it up. It's easy.
There you go, Bill. Go back for 4 years ago, all done.
No, I'm not this year.
No, I think Keith, that you guys did do them, it's been a while, but I'm just saying, all I was offering is a point of,
Yeah,
if you guys would just do that,
yeah.
to clean that
You're
up.
right.
Thank you.
You're right.
Good point, thank you.
So if you want to write a word between now and next week, or statements, do you need more discussion on the schools, or can you go ahead and do that?
I can't do it for the schools.
You're just, okay, so
No,
you're.
no, no, for the
That's what I
schools.
thought.
I think the school, but there's only a few articles for the schools, you know? And I think we can sort that out next Wednesday night and then before Saturday, I'll be able to just.
Motion to adjourn? Thank you, everybody.